The ballroom fell silent the moment Duke Calder Vance spoke her name. Every eye in the capital's elite turned toward the shadowed corner where Alara Voss stood, daughter of a traitor, ghost of a broken legacy, and the one mind he needed to survive what was coming. He offered his hand before 200 witnesses. Power, protection, a path back from disgrace. She looked at that outstretched hand like it was a loaded gun. Then she said the one word no one had ever dared speak to his face. No. The refusal cracked through the room like breaking glass. Somewhere in the darkness beyond the chandeliers, the real enemy smiled. This was no longer about politics. This was war. And neither of them knew they'd already lost the first round. If you want to see how far this storm reaches, hit that like button and drop a comment with your city. Let's see how far defiance travels. The thing about power, Calder Vance had learned early, was that it didn't ask permission. It took. It held. It crushed when necessary. And for 15 years, that philosophy had served him well enough that no one in the sovereignty's capital dared question it. He was 34 years old and controlled more political leverage than men twice his age. The Duke of Ashmark, the Iron Negotiator, the man who turned legislative sessions into bloodless battlefields and walked away clean every time. Tonight, he was about to make the worst tactical error of his career. The Winterlight Gala was the kind of event where reputations were built or buried beneath crystal chandeliers and polite smiles that cut like razors. Held annually in the Grand Conservatory, a glass-domed monument to old money and older corruption, it drew every power broker, industrialist, and political animal in the sovereignty. Calder moved through the crowd with the ease of someone who knew exactly how much fear his presence generated. His tailored black suit was immaculate. His expression was carved granite. People stepped aside before he had to ask. Marcus Hale, his senior strategist, matched his stride. She's here, northeast corner near the Winter Garden entrance. Hasn't moved in 20 minutes. Calder didn't break his pace. Alone? Completely. No one's approached her. Half the room doesn't even know who she is. Good. Let's keep the introduction memorable. Marcus shot him a look, the kind that said, this is a mistake without using words. They'd been working together long enough that Calder could read the concern. He ignored it. The plan was sound. Alara Voss was the daughter of Simon Voss, the codebreaker who'd been executed for treason 8 years ago after supposedly selling state encryption keys to foreign interests. She'd been 16 when they dragged her father to the gallows. She'd disappeared after that. No social presence, no political affiliations, nothing. But Calder's intelligence network was thorough. She'd been living in the industrial quarter under her mother's maiden name, working as a data analyst for a mid-tier security firm, staying invisible. Staying, except she wasn't invisible anymore. 3 weeks ago, one of Calder's financial forensic teams had flagged an anomaly in the sovereignty's banking algorithms, a nearly undetectable pattern that suggested someone was siphoning economic data at a scale that could destabilize entire sectors. The code's signature was brilliant, elegant, and hauntingly familiar. It matched fragments of Simon Voss's work, which meant either a dead man was haunting the financial system or his daughter had inherited more than just his name. Calder needed her. The conspiracy he was tracking, the one bleeding the sovereignty dry through 1,000 invisible cuts, required someone who could see patterns in chaos, someone expendable enough that if things went sideways, the fallout wouldn't reach him. Someone desperate enough to accept his terms. Alara Voss was perfect. He spotted her exactly where Marcus had indicated. She stood partially obscured by a marble column, a glass of untouched champagne in one hand, her gaze fixed on the crowd with the detached focus of someone analyzing variables. She wore a simple slate gray dress that cost nothing and fit poorly at the shoulders, a deliberate choice, Calder suspected to avoid drawing attention. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical knot. No jewelry, no makeup to speak of. She looked like someone who'd wandered into the wrong event and decided to study it like a scientific specimen. She looked nothing like the weapon he needed her to be. Yet. Calder adjusted his cufflinks and made his approach. The crowd parted. Conversations died in his wake. By the time he was 10 feet away, half the room was watching. Alara's gaze shifted to him, sharp, gray-green eyes that registered his presence without surprise, like she'd been expecting this. Alara Voss, his voice carried just enough to ensure witnesses. We need to talk. She took a slow sip of champagne, then set the glass down on a nearby table. No, we don't. Someone behind him inhaled sharply. Calder kept his expression neutral. I think you misunderstand the situation. I understand it fine. Her voice was quiet but clear. No tremor. No deference. You want something from me. I'm not interested. That's the end of this conversation. Uki eats. The refusal was so direct, so devoid of political dance, that for a moment Calder genuinely couldn't process it. People didn't say no to him. Not in public. Not ever. He took a step closer, lowering his voice to something that wouldn't reach the eager ears around them. Your father's work is being used, right now, to dismantle economic infrastructure across 4 provinces. Whoever's behind it is smart enough to stay hidden, but not smart enough to cover the signature completely. I need someone who understands that signature. I need you. Then hire a cryptographer. I need someone invested, someone who has a reason to want the truth. Her eyes flicked past him to the crowd, then back. What I want, Duke Vance, is to be left alone. I've spent 8 years invisible. I plan to stay that way. Even if it means letting your father's legacy be used as a weapon? That landed. He saw it in the faint tightening at the corner of her mouth. But instead of capitulation, he got something worse, a cold, measured smile that didn't reach her eyes. My father's legacy, she said softly, was being hanged as a traitor while I watched. I don't need you to protect it. And I definitely don't need you to use me to salvage whatever political game you're playing. So unless you're planning to drag me out of here by force, which I'm guessing would be bad optics even for you, this conversation is over. She turned and walked away, just like that. No hesitation. No backward glance. The room held its breath. Calder stood frozen, his carefully constructed dominance fracturing in real time. Marcus appeared at his elbow, voice barely a murmur. Calder, we need to move. Now. But Calder couldn't move. Because in 15 years of political warfare, no one had ever simply walked away from him. And worse than the embarrassment, worse than the fracture in his authority, was the creeping realization that Alara Voss had just made him look weak in front of every major power player in the capital, which meant she'd just painted a target on both their backs. 2 hours later, Calder sat in his study with a glass of whiskey he wasn't drinking and a growing awareness that he'd miscalculated badly. Marcus stood by the window, arms crossed, wearing the expression of someone who'd predicted disaster and taken no pleasure in being right. She's not going to cooperate, Marcus said. And after tonight, approaching her again makes you look desperate. I'm aware. The people we're investigating, whoever they are, they're watching. They saw what happened. They know you went after her publicly. Also aware. Marcus turned. Then what the hell was that? You're smarter than this. You don't make moves that exposed unless you're sure of the outcome. Calder set the glass down harder than necessary. I was sure she had every reason to accept. Protection, resources, a chance to clear her father's name, or maybe she's tired of being used. Marcus's voice was flat. Her father was used, framed probably, based on what we're uncovering. She's smart enough to see you were about to do the same thing, just with better manners. The accusation hung in the air. Calder wanted to argue, but the logic was sound. He'd approached Alara Voss the way he approached every negotiation, with leverage, pressure, and the assumption that need would override pride. He'd miscalculated her completely. So what do? You walk away. Find another analyst. Someone who actually wants the job. There is no one else. Not with her skill set. Then you're screwed. Calder leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. The conspiracy he was chasing wasn't theoretical. 3 governors had resigned in the past 6 months under mysterious financial pressure. 2 industrial conglomerates had collapsed overnight. The economic patterns were surgical, deliberate, and devastating. And every thread led back to fragments of code that bore Simon Voss's signature, code that shouldn't exist, because all his work had supposedly been destroyed after his execution, which meant someone had preserved it, hidden it, and was now weaponizing it. If Calder couldn't stop it, the entire sovereignty could fracture. And when it did, the blame would land squarely on him, the Duke who saw the threat and failed to act. I need her, Calder said quietly. There's no version of this where I don't. Marcus sighed. Then you need to change tactics. Because whatever you did tonight, It backfired spectacularly. Alara Voss unlocked the door to her apartment at midnight and immediately knew someone had been inside. Nothing obvious. No forced entry, no disturbed furniture. Just the faint scent of expensive cologne and the feeling of space that had been violated. She closed the door slowly, locked it, and scanned the single-room studio with clinical precision. The intruder was sitting in the dark by the window. She saw his silhouette against the city lights, tall, broad-shouldered, utterly still. "Breaking and entering," she said calmly, flipping the light switch. "That's a felony even for dukes." Calder Vance didn't flinch at the sudden brightness. He sat in her one decent chair like he owned it, hands folded, expression unreadable. "Your building security is embarrassingly bad. I had my people patch the vulnerabilities. You're welcome. Get out." "Not until we finish the conversation you walked away from." Alara dropped her bag on the counter and moved to the kitchen area, partially to put distance between them, partially to get closer to the knife block. "You humiliated yourself tonight. Coming here just makes it worse." "I made a mistake," Calder said. "Flat. No deflection. I approached you like a transaction. That was wrong." She turned, genuinely surprised. "Did you just apologize?" "I acknowledged a tactical error. Not the same thing." "Close enough that I'm officially worried." She leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "What do you actually want?" "The truth. About your father. About the code that's being used right now to dismantle the sovereignty's economy. About who's really responsible. And you think I'll just hand that to you? Yet, no, I think you'll want it for yourself." He stood, moving into the light. Up close, she could see the fatigue around his eyes, the kind that came from too many late nights chasing threats. "Your father was executed for treason. But what if he wasn't a traitor? What if someone framed him, stole his work, and has been using it ever since?" Alara's throat tightened. She forced her voice to stay level. "That's a convenient theory. It's the only theory that fits the data, and you know it, because you've been tracking the same patterns I have." She stared at him. "You're guessing. Your employer flagged you last month for running unauthorized deep layer analysis on state banking infrastructure. They assumed you were building a side business." "I know better. You were looking for your father's fingerprints." Damn, he'd done his homework. "Even if that's true," Alara said carefully, "why would I work with you? You're a political predator. Everything you do is about leverage. Because alone you'll get yourself killed. Whoever's behind this has resources, reach, and no hesitation about removing obstacles. You're smart, Voss, but you're not invisible anymore. Not after tonight. They saw me approach you, which means they know you're a threat. A threat you created by dragging me into the spotlight. Yes. No hesitation. Which means I owe you protection and answers. Work with me, temporarily. We find the truth, we expose it, and then you never have to see me again." Alara studied him. Every instinct screamed not to trust this man. He was everything she'd spent 8 years avoiding. Powerful, ruthless, politically embedded. But he was also right about one thing. She'd been looking for answers, and she'd been doing it alone, in the dark, with limited resources. "If I say yes," she said slowly, "I want full access. No filters, no compartmentalization. I see everything you see. Agreed. And if this goes bad, you don't throw me to the wolves. No scapegoats." His jaw tightened. "Agreed. And one more thing." She stepped forward, holding his gaze. "You ever lie to me, even once, I walk. And I take everything I've learned straight to your enemies." Calder's expression didn't shift, but something flickered in his eyes. Respect, maybe, or recognition. "Deal." He extended his hand. Alara looked at it for a long moment, the same hand she'd refused hours ago in front of 200 people. Everything had changed since then. Or maybe nothing had, and she was just too tired to keep fighting alone. She shook his hand. His grip was firm, controlled. "First session tomorrow," Calder said. "My estate. Bring everything you found. I work better at night." "Fine, tomorrow night, 11. He released her hand and moved toward the door, paused, looked back. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "your father's execution never sat right with me. I was 26, junior legislator. I didn't have the leverage to push back, but I should have tried. Then he was gone, leaving Alara alone in her suddenly too small apartment with the weight of a choice she couldn't take back. She walked to the window and stared out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, someone was using her father's genius to burn the world down, and she'd just agreed to help the most dangerous man in the capital stop them. What the hell have I done? The next evening, Alara arrived at Calder's estate with a secure data tablet and enough paranoia to fill a convoy. The estate itself was old money meets modern fortress, classical architecture wrapped in surveillance systems that probably cost more than her entire neighborhood. A severe-looking woman in her 50s met her at the entrance. "Miss Voss, I'm Lydia Crane, estate security. The Duke is waiting in the lower study. This way." Alara followed her through hallways lined with art that belonged in museums and into a subterranean workspace that looked like a war room. Screens covered one wall, displaying financial data streams, encrypted communications logs, and network maps that made her pulse quicken. Calder stood at a central console with Marcus Hale at his side. They both turned as she entered. "Voss." Calder gestured to a workstation. "Everything we've collected is on that system. Encrypted, air-gapped from external networks. Start wherever you want." Alara set down her tablet and approached the console. The data was overwhelming. Months of surveillance, transaction records, communication intercepts. But within minutes, she started seeing the architecture, the patterns. "This isn't random," she murmured, fingers flying across the interface. "It's phased. Look, 3-month intervals, each targeting a different economic sector. Agriculture, manufacturing, tech infrastructure. Whoever's running this is systematically weakening the sovereignty's foundations." Marcus leaned in. "We flagged that, but we can't identify the source. Because you're looking for a single actor, this is distributed. Multiple nodes, multiple handlers, all coordinated through..." She stopped, pulled up a secondary screen, ran a trace algorithm she'd built years ago. And there it was. A ghost signature buried in the traffic. Her father's encryption style, unmistakable as a fingerprint. "That's him," she whispered. "That's my father's work." Calder moved beside her. "Can you track it?" Maybe, but whoever's using it knows what they're doing. They've layered obfuscation protocols that... Wait. She isolated a fragment, enhanced it. "This is new. This was added recently. It's not my father's style. It's cleaner, more modern. Meaning someone took his original code and updated it, improved it." She turned to Calder. "Do you have access to the trial records? Everything they claim my father did?" "Already pulled them." Marcus gestured to another console. "Complete transcripts, evidence logs, forensic analysis." Alara spent the next 2 hours cross-referencing the trial evidence against the current code fragments. Calder and Marcus worked parallel investigations, Calder pulling legislative records, Marcus coordinating surveillance teams tracking financial anomalies in real time. They didn't speak much. Didn't need to. The work had its own rhythm. Around 2 a.m, Alara sat back, rubbing her eyes. The evidence at the trial was fabricated. Calder looked up. "You're certain?" "The encryption keys they claim my father sold. The code structure doesn't match his work. At all. Someone created forgeries good enough to fool a military tribunal, but not good enough to fool someone who actually understands his methods." She pulled up a comparison. "Look, the trial evidence uses recursive layering. My father never used that technique. He considered it inelegant. So someone framed him, and then took his real work, probably seized during the investigation, and has been weaponizing it ever since." Alara's voice was ice. "They killed him to cover their tracks, and they've been bleeding the sovereignty dry for 8 years. Marcus swore quietly. "Who has that kind of reach, that kind of patience?" "Someone embedded in the system," Calder said. "Someone who was there 8 years ago and is still there now." They looked at each other. The implication was staggering. Alara pulled up a new interface. "I can build a trace protocol. If we can isolate the current command architecture, we can work backwards to the source. But it'll take time, and we'll need access to state banking infrastructure, full access." "I can get that," Calder said, "but it'll raise flags. Whoever's behind this will know we're hunting them. Good, Alara said. Let them know. Maybe they'll make a mistake. Calder smiled, a predatory thing with no warmth. I like how you think. Over the next 3 days, they worked around the clock. Alara built trace algorithms that mapped the conspiracy's digital fingerprints across the sovereignty's economic systems. Calder leveraged every legislative contact he had to secure access without triggering oversight committees. Marcus coordinated a quiet intelligence operation, tracking financial movements and personnel transfers that might indicate panic. They were making progress, real progress, which is when everything fell apart. On the 4th night, Alara was deep in code when alarms screamed through the estate. Lydia Crane's voice crackled over the security system. Perimeter breach, multiple hostiles, lockdown initiated. Calder was on his feet instantly. Voss, stay down. Marcus, kill the external connections. The lights died. Emergency systems kicked in, bathing everything in red. Alara heard gunfire. Distant, then closer. They're coming for the data, Marcus said, weapon drawn. We need to purge. No. Alara's voice was sharp. Give me 30 seconds. She rerouted the entire investigation database to an encrypted partition, then triggered a data ghost, a decoy system that would feed the attackers fake information while the real files burned themselves into a distributed backup she'd built without telling anyone. It was paranoid. It was also the only reason the last 4 days of work wouldn't be lost. 28 seconds. The door exploded inward. Smoke, flashbangs, men in tactical gear moving with military precision. Calder shoved Alara behind a console. She saw him draw a pistol she didn't know he carried. Saw him fire twice. Saw one attacker drop. Then someone hit Calder from the side and he went down hard. Alara's mind went cold and clear. She grabbed the secure tablet, smashed its core processor with a paperweight, then ran for the secondary exit Lydia had shown her on day 1. Behind her, she heard Marcus shouting. Gunfire. Chaos. She ran. The estate's underground passages were a maze, but she'd memorized the layout. She could hear pursuit, boots on stone, radio chatter. She burst out into the estate's northern gardens just as security reinforcements arrived. Lydia Crane was orchestrating a tactical response, barking orders into her comm. She saw Alara and grabbed her arm. Are you hit? No. Calder. Secured. They pulled back when reinforcements arrived. But Miss Voss... Lydia's expression was grim. This wasn't a robbery. They went straight for the study. They knew exactly what you were working on. Alara's blood went cold. Someone talked. Or someone's been watching closer than we thought. Back in the study, Calder was on his feet, blood streaming from a cut above his eye, his expression murderous. Marcus was coordinating with Lydia, checking the security breach points. The room was trashed, screens shattered, consoles smoking, but the data was gone. Transferred. Safe. Calder looked at Alara. You're not hurt. I'm fine. You're bleeding. It's nothing. He wiped blood from his face. They came for you. They came for the investigation. Same thing now. His voice was quiet, dangerous. Whoever's behind this just escalated, which means we're close, closer than they can tolerate. Alara felt something shift in her chest. Not fear, something sharper, colder. Then we finish it, she said, before they get another chance. Calder met her eyes, and for the first time since they'd met, she saw something other than calculation there. She saw fury, purpose, and maybe, just maybe, the beginning of trust. Agreed, he said. We finish it. Outside, dawn was breaking over the capital, and somewhere in the city's political shadows, the real enemy was realizing they'd just made a critical mistake. They'd shown their hand, and Alara Voss never forgot a pattern. The attack changed everything. Not because of the physical damage. Lydia's security team had the estate locked down within hours, reinforced protocols in place, new perimeter systems online. Not even because of the data breach attempt, which had failed spectacularly thanks to Alara's paranoid backup protocols. The attack changed everything because it proved that whoever they were hunting had reach inside Calder's world, close enough to know what they were investigating, close enough to strike at the heart of his power, which meant someone in his inner circle was compromised. Calder stood in the rebuilt study 2 days later, watching Marcus coordinate security sweeps with a level of scrutiny that would have seemed excessive a week ago. Now it felt necessary. Alara sat at her workstation, eyes red from lack of sleep, running counter-surveillance protocols on every device, every network node, every person who'd had access to their investigation. Nothing, she said finally, pushing back from the console. No digital footprints, no suspicious data requests, no external communications that don't check out. Whoever fed them information did it offline. Old school. Which means someone talked, face to face. Calder's voice was flat. Someone I trusted. Marcus looked up. We've vetted everyone. Twice. Lydia's team, my analysts, the household staff. Then we didn't look hard enough. Alara stood, stretching muscles that had been locked in one position too long. Or we're asking the wrong question. Maybe it's not about who talked. Maybe it's about what they heard. Who knew enough about our investigation to point attackers at the right location? Calder turned. Besides the three of us? Lydia, her two senior operatives, the legislative clerk who processed my data access requests, the oversight committee member who signed off on... He stopped. Aldrich Thorne. Marcus's expression darkened. The committee chairman. You think he's involved? I think he's the only person outside this room who had the full scope of what we were investigating. I gave him a classified briefing 4 days ago to secure expanded access. 24 hours later, we get hit. That's not proof, Marcus said carefully. Thorne's been in the legislature for 30 years. His reputation, is exactly what makes him useful. Alara's voice was quiet, but something in her tone made both men look at her. The people we're hunting aren't stupid. They wouldn't use someone obvious. They'd use someone untouchable. Someone whose credibility could bury accusations before they gained traction. Calder studied her. You've been thinking about this. I've been thinking about my father, about how a man with his security clearance, his expertise, his loyalty to the sovereignty could be framed so completely that no one questioned it. Not really. They executed him in 3 weeks. No appeals. No secondary review. Someone with serious political weight made that happen. She met Calder's gaze. Someone like Aldrich Thorne. The silence stretched. Marcus broke it first. If you're right, if Thorne is compromised or worse, we can't touch him. Not without evidence that'll survive scrutiny. He chairs the oversight committee. He could bury us with a single motion. Then we don't go after him directly. Alara pulled up a new interface. We make him expose himself. I've been tracking the financial patterns, right? The attacks on the sovereignty's economy are phased, surgical, but they're also reactive. Every time a sector stabilizes, the attacks shift, which means whoever's running this is monitoring government responses in real time. They're adapting. So what if we feed them false information? Make them think we're about to expose their operation in the agricultural sector, when really we're building a trap in the tech infrastructure they're currently bleeding dry. They'll have to respond, shift resources, and when they do, we trace the response back to its source. Calder's expression shifted. It's risky. If they realize it's a feint, they'll know we're onto them. They already know we're onto them. They tried to kill us 3 nights ago. Alara's voice was ice. The question isn't whether they're watching. It's whether we can use that against them. Marcus looked between them. You're both insane. You know that, right? Calder smiled, the predatory thing that made adversaries nervous. Probably. Set it up, Voss. But we do this carefully. Controlled leak. Limited distribution. If this goes wrong, I want to know exactly who burned us. Agreed. Alara was already coding. I'll need access to Thorne's communication logs, email, phone records, meeting schedules. That's illegal without a warrant. Then get me a warrant. On what grounds? A hunch? Alara stopped typing, looked at him directly. On the grounds that 4 days after you briefed Aldrich Thorne, armed mercenaries tried to destroy our investigation and possibly kill me. If that's not probable cause, I don't know what is. Calder held her gaze for a long moment. Then he turned to Marcus. Get the warrant. Quietly. Use Judge Kerrigan. She owes me a favor, and she's not on any oversight committees. Marcus nodded and left. Alara went back to her screen, but Calder didn't move. She could feel him watching her. "What?" she said without looking up. "You're different." "Different how?" 3 days ago, you wanted to be invisible. Now you're building traps for high-ranking government officials and requesting illegal surveillance warrants. What changed? Alara's fingers paused on the keyboard. They tried to take my father's work and use it to destroy everything he believed in. Then they came after me. I'm done being invisible. Good, Calder said quietly. Because what comes next is going to require visibility. A lot of it. And it won't be safe. I didn't sign up for safe. I signed up for answers. You'll get them. But Voss? He waited until she looked at him. When this is over, when we've exposed whoever's behind this, they're going to come after you with everything they have. Legal attacks, character assassination, worse. You need to be ready for that. I've been ready since I was 16 and watched my father hang. Her voice didn't shake. I'm not the one who needs to worry. Something flickered in Calder's expression. Respect, maybe, or recognition of something familiar. He nodded once and left her to her work. Alara sat in the quiet hum of the security systems and let herself breathe. Her hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against the console until they stopped. She'd meant what she said. She wasn't afraid. But she was also smart enough to know that fear and caution weren't the same thing. What they were planning could blow up spectacularly, could get them both killed or worse. But the alternative, letting her father's killers walk free, letting them continue weaponizing his genius, that was unacceptable. She pulled up the encryption interface and got back to work. The warrant came through 18 hours later. Judge Kerrigan had processed it under a sealed investigative order that wouldn't show up in public records for 60 days. By then, Alara hoped, this would either be over or they'd all be dead. She spent the next 36 hours buried in Aldrich Thorne's digital life. Emails, phone logs, meeting schedules, financial transactions. Most of it was exactly what you'd expect from a senior legislator. Policy briefs, constituent meetings, fundraising dinners. Boring, clean, too clean. He's scrubbed, she told Calder on the second night. Everything's sanitized. No questionable contacts, no unexplained meetings, no financial irregularities. Either he's genuinely innocent or he's smart enough to keep his conspiracy work completely offline. Which one do you think it is? I think anyone who's been in the legislature for 30 years without a single scandal is either a saint or very, very good at hiding things. She pulled up a calendar overlay. But look at this. 3 weeks before my father's trial, Thorne took a personal leave. 5 days. No explanation in the official records. His office claimed a family emergency, but there's no documentation, no hospital visits, no travel records, nothing. Calder leaned in. Could be coincidence. Could be. Except he did it again 2 months before the Kerrigan industrial collapse. And again right before Governor Hale's resignation. She highlighted the dates. Every major event in this conspiracy is preceded by Thorne going dark for a few days, like he's meeting with someone he can't afford to have traced. That's still circumstantial. I know, but it's a pattern, and patterns are all we have right now. Marcus entered carrying printouts. I've got something. Thorne's financial records are clean, like Voss said, but his chief of staff, a guy named Renner Cross, he's got some interesting investment activity. Specifically, he's been shorting companies right before they collapse. Not huge positions, nothing that would trigger regulatory scrutiny, but consistent, profitable. Alara took the printouts, scanned them. He's insider trading based on the conspiracy's targets, which means he knows what's coming. Or Thorne tells him, Calder said, uses him as a cutout. Cross makes the trades. They split the profits through some offshore arrangement we haven't found yet. Can we bring Cross in? Question him? Not without tipping off Thorne, and if Cross is loyal, or scared enough, he'll lawyer up and we get nothing, Calder paced. We need them to move first. Make a mistake we can exploit. Alara pulled up the false intelligence package she'd been building. Then let's give them something to move on. I've constructed a fake analysis showing we've traced the conspiracy's agricultural sector attacks to a specific banking algorithm. The algorithm doesn't actually exist, but it's plausible enough that if Thorne is involved, he'll have to warn whoever's running the operation. And when he does, we're monitoring all his communications, Marcus finished. If he reaches out, we catch it. What if he does it in person, like you said, old school? Ilara smiled. Then we follow him. I've tagged his vehicle with a micro-tracker, military grade, impossible to sweep without specialized equipment he doesn't have access to. Calder stared at her. When did you do that? Yesterday, while you were in the legislative session. Figured we might need it. Marcus laughed, a short, surprised sound. She's learning from you. That's terrifying. No, Calder said, still watching Ilara. She's not learning. She already knew. She just wasn't using it. He turned to Marcus. Distribute the false intelligence. Narrow circulation. Thorne and 2 junior analysts we know are clean. Make it look like a working draft, not a final report. Like we're still developing the lead. When? Now. Let's see how fast he reacts. The package went out at 1400. By 1630, Aldrich Thorne had cleared his afternoon schedule and left the legislative building in his personal vehicle. Ilara tracked him through the micro-GPS, watching the blue dot move through the capital's streets with purpose. He wasn't going home. Wasn't going to any of his usual haunts. He's heading southeast, she reported. Industrial district. That's not on his normal route. Calder and Marcus were already moving. They took an unmarked vehicle, staying 3 blocks back, letting the GPS do the work. Thorne drove for 20 minutes, finally pulling into a derelict warehouse complex that had been slated for demolition for years but never actually torn down. He parked, got out, looked around with the careful attention of someone checking for surveillance. Then he went inside. We can't follow him in, Marcus said. Too exposed. If he sees us... I know. Calder pulled out his phone. But we can see who else shows up. They waited. 15 minutes passed. Then a second vehicle arrived. An executive sedan with tinted windows. 2 people got out. Even from a distance, Ilara recognized the body language. Professional. Military bearing. Private security, she murmured. High-end. Ye Bashras Gai Basam. The 2 figures entered the warehouse. Another 10 minutes. Then all 3 emerged. Thorne, the 2 security personnel, and a 4th person Ilara didn't recognize. Tall, thin, wearing expensive clothes that didn't match the industrial setting. They spoke briefly. Thorne looked agitated. The thin man looked calm, almost amused. Then they separated. Thorne got in his vehicle and drove away. The sedan left in the opposite direction. Calder made a decision. Marcus, you follow Thorne. Make sure he goes somewhere public. Voss and I are going after the sedan. That's a bad idea. If they're professionals, they are, which is why we're not engaging, just identifying. Calder was already moving. Go. Marcus swore but followed orders. Calder and Ilara tailed the sedan through increasingly affluent neighborhoods until it pulled into the private garage of a corporate tower in the capital's financial center. The building's signage read Corvus Strategic Consulting. Ilara pulled up the company on her tablet. Shell Corporation, registered 3 years ago. Publicly, they do risk assessment and financial consulting, but their client list is sealed, and their CEO is... She stopped, went pale. What? Marcus Renfeld, former military intelligence. He was part of the tribunal that prosecuted my father. Calder's expression went very still. Are you certain? I'm looking at his face right now. I'll never forget it. He was the one who presented the encryption key evidence, the forgeries. Her voice was shaking. He's the one who built the case that killed my father. Then we have him. We have a connection, not proof. But even as she said it, Ilara was already building the framework in her mind. Renfeld prosecutes Simon Voss using false evidence. Simon's real work gets seized. Renfeld, with access to classified material, takes it. Starts Corvus Strategic as a front. Uses Simon's algorithms to manipulate economic systems. Profits massively while destabilizing the sovereignty. Uses people like Thorne to maintain political cover. It all fit. We need his files, Ilara said. Corporate records, communication logs, everything. If we can prove he took my father's work, We'll need more than digital forensics, Calder said. We'll need physical evidence, documents, hardware, something that can't be dismissed as fabricated. Alara looked at the building, at the layers of security visible even from the street. You're talking about breaking in. I'm talking about exposing a traitor who's been operating with impunity for 8 years. Yes, that's illegal, even for you. So is treason, so is murder, so is framing an innocent man and stealing his life's work. Calder's voice was quiet but absolute. I've spent 15 years playing by rules that people like Renfeld ignore. I'm done with that. If you want answers, real answers, we're going to have to take them. Alara stared at him. This was the line. The point where careful investigation became something else. Something that could destroy them both if it went wrong. If we do this, she said carefully, and it goes bad, they won't just bury us. They'll erase us. Everything we've found, everything we've built, it'll disappear. I know. And you're still willing to risk it. For the truth? Yes. He turned to face her fully. But I won't make you do the same. You've already risked enough. If you want to walk away, I'll understand. I'll protect you as much as I can, and you can... No. The word came out harder than she intended. I'm not walking away. Not from this. Not from them. She met his gaze. But if we're doing this, we do it smart. No heroics, no improvisation. We plan every step, every contingency, every exit. Something shifted in Calder's expression. Not quite a smile. Something deeper. Agreed. We do this right or not at all. Bait all sorts. They spent the next week planning. Alara mapped Corvus Strategic's security systems, digital and physical. Calder leveraged contacts to obtain building schematics and security rotation schedules. Marcus, once convinced this wasn't complete suicide, coordinated equipment and backup protocols. Lydia trained them both in infiltration basics, how to move, how to avoid cameras, how to disable alarms without triggering failsafes. You're both terrible at this, Lydia said on day 4, watching Alara nearly trip over her own feet during a practice run. Truly terrible. That's encouraging, Alara muttered. It's honest, which is why you're not going in through the front. You're going in through the infrastructure access tunnel that connects to the building's sub-basement. Less glamorous, much harder to patrol effectively. Calder studied the updated schematics. That puts us 3 floors below the executive offices where Renfeld's files would be stored. Yes, which means you'll need to bypass internal security checkpoints. I'm working on credentials that might get you through. Might. And if they don't? Lydia's expression was grim. Then you run very fast and hope I can extract you before Renfeld's people turn you into a political scandal. They set the infiltration for a Friday night, when corporate security was reduced to weekend shifts and Renfeld would be at a charity gala across the city, his attendance confirmed through social media. Alara built a digital infiltration kit that could bypass most commercial security systems. Calder acquired weapons neither of them wanted to use, but both knew they might need. The night before the operation, Alara couldn't sleep. She stood in the estate's library, staring at shelves of books she wasn't reading, trying to quiet the adrenaline screaming through her system. She heard footsteps, turned. Calder stood in the doorway. You should rest, he said. Can't. Too wired. He moved into the room, poured 2 glasses of brandy from a crystal decanter, handed her one. Drink. It helps. Alara took it. The liquor burned. She coughed. I don't drink. Tonight you do. He leaned against the desk. Are you afraid? Terrified. You? Always. Anyone who says they're not afraid before something like this is either lying or stupid. He sipped his drink. But fear is useful. Keeps you sharp. Keeps you careful. Is that what you tell yourself before every dangerous political move? Every single one. He smiled slightly. And for what it's worth, I've never worked with anyone who adapted as fast as you have. Marcus thinks you're wasted in data analysis. Says you should be running intelligence operations. Marcus is biased. Marcus is right. Calder set down his glass. After this is over, after we've exposed Renfeld and cleared your father's name, you could have a real future in the sovereignty's security apparatus, if you wanted it. Alara looked at him. Is Is that an offer? It's a recognition. You're too talented to stay invisible. Maybe I like invisible. No, you don't. Not anymore. He moved closer. You want justice. You want accountability. And you're willing to burn down anyone who stands in the way of that. I recognize it because it's the same thing I want. The same thing that's driven me for 15 years. And look where it's gotten you. Feared, isolated, trusting no one. Until now. The words hung between them. Calder's expression shifted, something vulnerable breaking through the political armor. You could have walked away after the attack. Probably should have, but you didn't, and I still don't entirely understand why. Elara held his gaze. Because you were right. About my father. About the conspiracy. About me needing answers more than safety. She paused. And because for the first time since he died, someone actually believed me when I said he was innocent. That mattered. It wasn't belief, it was evidence. No, you started investigating before you had evidence. You trusted your instinct. That's belief. She finished her brandy. Tomorrow, we're either going to expose the truth or get ourselves killed. Either way, I need you to know. I don't regret this, any of it. Calder stepped closer, close enough that she could see the fatigue around his eyes, the tension in his shoulders. Neither do I. For a moment, Elara thought he might say something else. Do something else. But instead, he just nodded once and left, leaving her alone with her thoughts and the growing certainty that tomorrow would change everything, one way or another. The infiltration started at 2300. Elara and Calder entered the infrastructure tunnel through a maintenance access point 2 blocks from Corvus Strategic. The tunnel was exactly as disgusting as Lydia had warned. Damp concrete, poor lighting, the smell of mildew, and things better left unexamined. They moved in silence, night vision equipment painting everything in shades of green. The tunnel connected to Corvus's sub-basement through a service door that should have been locked. Lydia's credentials worked. The door opened. They were inside. The sub-basement was a maze of mechanical systems and storage. Elara pulled up the building schematics on a handheld display, orienting them toward the maintenance elevator that would take them to the executive floors. They reached it without incident. Used Lydia's fabricated security card. The elevator rose. 3rd floor. 5th. 10th. The doors opened on the 15th floor. Executive territory. Plush carpets. Modern art. The kind of corporate luxury that screamed money and power. The corridor was empty. Security cameras swept in predictable patterns. Elara had mapped them all. She led Calder through the blind spots, moving quickly, efficiently. Renfeld's office was at the end of the hall. The door had a biometric lock. Elara pulled out a bypass device, something she'd built from military-grade components Marcus had acquired through channels no one discussed. It cycled through stored fingerprint data, searching for a match. 30 seconds. 45. Voss, Calder murmured. We've got movement. Ground floor. Elara didn't look up. How many? 2 guards. Routine patrol. But they're heading for the elevators. 60 seconds. The device chirped softly. The lock disengaged. They slipped inside. Closed the door. Elara moved to Renfeld's desk, pulling out a data extraction device. She plugged it into his computer terminal. Started the download. How long? Calder asked, watching the door. 5 minutes for the full system image. We might not have 5 minutes. Then keep watch and let me work. The download crawled. Elara forced herself to breathe slowly, watching the progress bar inch forward. Outside, she could hear the elevator doors open, footsteps in the corridor. Close. Too close. 4 minutes. The footsteps stopped. Right outside the door. Calder moved silently to the side, hand on his weapon. Elara kept working, fingers flying across the keyboard, building a secondary extraction protocol in case they had to run before the primary finished. A radio crackled. 15 clear. Moving to 16. The footsteps resumed, moved away. Elara exhaled. 5 minutes. The download completed. She pulled the device, pocketed it, then opened Renfeld's physical files. Most were corporate paperwork. Contracts. Financial statements. Nothing incriminating. Then she found it. A locked drawer in the desk's lower left. She used a pick kit Lydia had given her, working the mechanism with hands that wanted to shake but didn't. The lock gave. Inside was a portable secure storage device and a thin folder marked with a classification level that made her blood freeze. Sovereign level access only. Voss acquisition, archive copy. She opened it. Inside were documents she recognized, her father's trial records, the forged encryption keys, but also technical specifications for algorithms he'd actually designed, documentation of their seizure, and transfer orders signed by Marcus Renfeld authorizing their classification under a black budget program that officially didn't exist. Calder. He was beside her in an instant. She showed him the documents, watched his expression go cold and deadly. "This is it," he said quietly. "This is everything we need." Alara photographed every page with a secure camera device, then replaced the folder exactly as she'd found it. Took the portable storage device. If Renfeld noticed it missing, they'd already be exposed anyway. They moved back to the door. The corridor was clear. They reversed their route, through the blind spots, into the elevator, down to the sub-basement. Every step felt like walking on glass. One mistake, one unexpected guard rotation, one camera they'd missed, but they made it. Back through the service door into the tunnel, moving faster now, the evidence secure in Alara's pack. They emerged into the night air 2 blocks away. Lydia was waiting with a vehicle. They got in. She drove. No one spoke until they were back at the estate. In the study, Alara laid out the evidence, the documents, the storage device, the full system image from Renfeld's computer. Calder and Marcus went through it all methodically, while Alara worked on decrypting the storage device. What they found was damning, comprehensive, undeniable. Renfeld had taken Simon Voss's algorithms, weaponized them, built Corvus Strategic as a cover for economic manipulation on a massive scale, used political contacts like Aldrich Thorne to maintain protection and advance warning of investigations, profited billions while destabilizing the sovereignty's economy to create further opportunities for exploitation. And he'd killed Simon Voss to cover it all up. "We have him," Marcus said. "This is airtight. We take this to the justice minister, to the military tribunal, to—" "No." Calder's voice was flat. "We can't trust official channels. If Renfeld has Thorne, he has others. The moment we file formal charges, this evidence disappears and we become the targets." "Then what do we do?" Alara looked up from her decryption work. "We go public, completely public. Release everything simultaneously to media outlets, legislative committees, civilian oversight boards. Make it impossible to suppress." "That's career suicide," Marcus said, "for all of us. The exposure, the questions, the investigations." "Better than actual suicide," Alara shot back. "Which is what happens if we try to play this quietly and Renfeld gets to us first." "Ambo ba'itusas." Calder stood, paced. "She's right. We make this loud, unavoidable. Force a response before they can coordinate a cover-up." He turned to Marcus. "Can you prepare the distribution? I want packages ready for every major news organization, every legislative committee chair, every—" An alarm shrieked through the estate. Lydia's voice crackled over the security system, urgent and sharp. "We've got multiple vehicles approaching, armed personnel. They're coming in fast." Alara's blood went cold. They know we were there." Calder grabbed the evidence. "Marcus, get this to the backup location. Transmit everything you can to our media contacts before—" The lights died. The emergency systems failed. Even the security feeds went dark. This wasn't an attack. This was a raid. And this time, they weren't coming to steal data. Calder shoved the evidence files into Marcus's hands. "Go, now. Back exit through the east wing. Don't stop. Don't look back." Marcus hesitated for half a second, long enough for Alara to see the conflict in his face, the instinct to stay and fight. Then he was moving, disappearing into the darkness with everything they'd risked their lives to obtain. Lydia's voice cut through the emergency channel, barely audible over static. "They've jammed communications. I'm engaging, but they've got numbers. You need to—" The feed died completely. Alara grabbed her tablet, fingers moving on muscle memory even as her heart tried to punch through her ribs. "I can reroute power to the security grid. Give us eyes." No time. Calder pulled a pistol from the desk drawer, checked the magazine. They cut the main lines. This isn't about surveillance. They want us contained. Then what do we do? Oh, sorry. Bossing. He looked at her. Really looked at her. And for the first time since they'd met, she saw something close to regret in his eyes. We fight our way out, or we die here. Those are the options. Alara's mind went cold and clear, the same way it had during the first attack. She pulled open a drawer she'd noticed weeks ago but never mentioned, the one Calder thought was hidden. Inside was a compact handgun and 2 spare magazines. She took it, checked it the way Lydia had taught her during their training sessions. Calder's eyebrow rose. When you were in legislative sessions and I was supposed to be working, Lydia's been teaching me. She met his gaze. I told you I was done being helpless. Apparently. He moved to the door, listening. Footsteps above them. Heavy. Organized. They're sweeping floor by floor, coming down. The wine cellar access, the tunnel Lydia showed me. That's defensive positioning. We'd be trapped. Better than dead in the next 3 minutes. Alara was already moving toward the hidden panel behind the bookshelf. Unless you have a better idea? I'll try it, guys. Calder followed. They slipped through the panel into a narrow passage that led down into the estate's original foundation, stone, corridors built centuries ago when the property had been a defensive position during the sovereignty's founding wars. The air was damp and cold. Their footsteps echoed. Behind them, they heard the study door explode inward. They ran. The passage opened into the wine cellar, a vaulted space lined with racks of bottles worth more than most people's houses. Alara went straight to the far wall, found the concealed lever Lydia had shown her. A section of stone swung inward, revealing a maintenance tunnel that connected to the city's old sewer system. You've been planning escape routes, Calder said. Someone had to. She pulled out her tablet, brought up a map she'd built from municipal records. This tunnel runs for 2 miles before connecting to the transit station at Herald Square. If we can make it there, gunfire erupted above them. Close. Too close. They entered the tunnel. Calder sealed the entrance behind them. It wouldn't hold forever, but it might buy minutes. They moved through darkness lit only by the tablet's screen, through passages that stank of sewage and decay, and things that had been forgotten by the city above. 10 minutes. 15. Alara's lungs burned. Her legs screamed. But she kept moving because stopping meant capture, and capture meant everything they'd fought for would die with them. The tunnel forked. Alara checked her map. Left. 300 meters to the junction. They went left. Behind them, distant sounds of pursuit. Voices. Radio chatter. The attackers had found the tunnel entrance. 200 meters. 100. The junction appeared. A larger chamber where multiple passages intersected. Alara oriented them toward the exit route. They were close. So close. Then flashlight beams cut through the darkness ahead of them. They were boxed in. Calder pulled her into a side passage, barely more than a crack in the stone. They pressed into the shadows, weapons ready, barely breathing. The beams swept past. 4 attackers moved through the junction, tactical gear, military discipline. One of them spoke into a radio. Junction clear. No contact. They must have taken the northern route. Negative. Northern route was collapsed in the last storm. If they're down here, they went east. The beams turned, moved away. The attackers headed east. Alara waited until the sounds faded, then let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. They're wrong. Northern route's not collapsed. I checked it last week. Calder stared at her. You've been mapping escape routes for weeks? I've been mapping everything. You think I survived 8 years invisible by not knowing every exit? She moved back into the junction. Come on. While they're searching the wrong direction, they took the northern passage. It was partially flooded, water up to their ankles, but intact. Alara's map showed it would take them to an emergency maintenance access point 3 blocks from the transit station. Not ideal, but better than being hunted through the tunnels. 20 minutes later, they emerged through a rusted grate into an alley behind a shuttered factory. The night air hit Alara like a physical shock after the tunnel's closeness. She gulped it down, trying not to vomit from exertion and adrenaline. Calder was on his phone. Marcus, talk to me. Static. Then, I'm at the backup location. Evidence is secure. But Calder, it's bad. They hit 4 other locations simultaneously. Your legislative office, your secondary residence, Marcus's apartment. They're not just coming after you, they're dismantling your entire network. Casualties? 2 of Lydia's people. She's alive but pinned down at the estate. The attackers have it locked down. Calder's expression went flat and deadly. Renfeld? No official statement yet, but Thorne just held an emergency press conference. He's claiming you've been under investigation for corruption and treason. Says tonight's raid was authorized by the Justice Ministry based on evidence of your involvement in economic sabotage. Alara felt the ground shift beneath her. They're framing him, using the same playbook they used on my father. Says. It's worse than that, Marcus continued. Thorne presented evidence. Financial records showing payments from Calder to shell companies connected to the economic attacks. Communications logs suggesting coordination with foreign interests. It's all fabricated, but it's good, professional. How long do we have? Hours, maybe less. They've issued arrest warrants. Every law enforcement agency in the capital is looking for you. Calder was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was ice. Then we don't run. We attack. Attack what? They control the narrative. They have official backing. Every institution that matters thinks you're the traitor. Then we go over their heads. Voss, can you access the evidence files remotely? Alara pulled up her tablet. If Marcus uploads them to the distributed server I set up, yes. But uploading that much data will take time, and it'll ping every monitoring system in the city. They'll know where we are within minutes. Do it anyway. Upload everything to every media outlet, every oversight committee, every civilian watchdog group you can reach. Flood the system. Make it impossible to suppress. Calder, that's the only move we have left. He turned to face her. They're going to kill us anyway. At least this way we take them down first. Alara looked at him, at the man who'd terrified half the capital's political establishment, now backed into a corner with nothing left but defiance. She thought about her father, about 16-year-old Alara watching him hang while people she'd trusted looked away. About 8 years of invisibility and survival and swallowing rage that had nowhere to go. Okay, she said, but not from here. We need a location with multiple exits and enough civilian presence that they can't just storm in shooting. Somewhere public. Herald Station, the transit hub. Calder was already moving. It's open all night. Security cameras everywhere. Hundreds of witnesses. They come after us there. It's on record. They ran through back alleys and side streets, avoiding the main thoroughfares where patrol vehicles were already cruising with searchlights. Alara's legs felt like they might give out. Her hands shook from adrenaline crash. But she kept moving because stopping wasn't an option. Herald Station loomed ahead, a massive Art Deco monument to the sovereignty's golden age, now a 24-hour transit hub serving 3 rail lines and 200,000 daily commuters. Even at this hour, it was busy. Night workers, students, people whose lives hadn't been turned into a nightmare in the past 4 hours. They entered through a side entrance, blending into the crowd. Found a bench near a coffee kiosk that gave them clear sightlines to 3 different exits. Alara pulled out her tablet and started the upload process while Calder kept watch. Files are uploading, she said quietly. But it's going to take 15 minutes minimum, maybe 20. But then we've got 15 minutes to stay invisible. Alara worked in silence, routing the data through multiple servers, using every obfuscation technique she knew. But there was no hiding this. Somewhere, monitoring systems were flagging the traffic. Analysts were triangulating the source. Response teams were mobilizing. 10 minutes passed. 12. Calder's phone buzzed. He checked it. His expression went very still. What? He showed her the screen. A news alert. Breaking. Duke Calder Vance wanted for treason. Armed and dangerous. Below it, photos. Her photo. Alara Voss, accomplice in economic sabotage plot. They're painting us as terrorists, Alara said numbly. Desperate move, which means the evidence Marcus has is hitting them harder than they expected. Calder scanned the station. But it also means every person here is looking for us now. As if summoned by his words, Alara saw heads turning, people checking phones, comparing faces to the news photos. A security guard 20 meters away reaching for his radio. "We're made," Calder said quietly. "Uploading? 92%. 2 minutes." "We don't have 2 minutes." The security guard was moving toward them. Behind him, 2 more guards. And near the north entrance, a tactical team in civilian clothes that weren't quite civilian enough. They were being surrounded. Alara kept working. 95%. 97. The first guard reached them. "Sir, ma'am, I need you to come with me." "We're just waiting for our train, Calder said calmly. "Sir, I'm going to have to insist." Calder stood. His hand moved to his weapon but didn't draw it, just rested there. A warning. "I'm going to insist you step back and let us finish what we're doing." The guard's hand went to his own weapon. The tactical team was closing in. Civilians were scattering, sensing violence about to erupt. 99%. "Calder Vance, you're under arrest for 100%. Alara hit the final command. The evidence files, all of them. Everything they'd stolen from Renfeld's office. Everything documenting the conspiracy. Transmitted simultaneously to 73 different recipients. News organizations, government oversight bodies, foreign embassies, civilian advocacy groups, independent journalists, everyone she could think of who might actually care about truth over politics. The tablet screen flashed green. Upload complete. "It's done," she said. Calder smiled, that predatory thing that had terrified people for 15 years. "Then let's finish this properly." He raised his hands. "I surrender, but I do it publicly, right here, with every camera in this station recording, and I demand immediate transport to a public tribunal, not some back room where I disappear." The lead tactical operator moved forward, weapon drawn. "You're not in a position to make demands." "Actually, I am. Because in about 30 seconds, every major media outlet in the sovereignty is going to receive evidence proving that Marcus Renfeld and Aldrich Thorne orchestrated the largest economic conspiracy in our history. Evidence proving they framed and executed an innocent man 8 years ago. Evidence proving I've been investigating them, not working with them." Calder's voice carried across the station. "So you can arrest me quietly and hope nobody notices, or you can arrest me publicly, on record, and deal with the questions that are about to bury your superiors." The operator hesitated, checked his radio. Alara could hear confused chatter, something about incoming media, about urgent calls from oversight committees, about the justice minister demanding to know what the hell was happening. The evidence was landing, in real time, across the entire political infrastructure. "Transport him to central detention," the operator said finally. "Full documentation, by the book." "Or set." They moved to cuff Calder. He looked at Alara. "Your turn. Demand the same thing. Public arrest, public processing. They can't disappear you if there's a paper trail." Alara stood, raised her hands. "I also surrender, and I also demand public processing and immediate access to legal representation." But a second team moved toward her. As they cuffed her, hands behind her back, metal cold against her wrists, she saw something shift in the crowd. People holding up phones, recording, streaming. The arrest was going viral in real time. They'd done it. They'd made this public. Unavoidable. But as they were being led toward separate transport vehicles, Alara realized the real fight was just beginning, because evidence wasn't the same as justice. And powerful people didn't go down easily. The transport vehicle pulled away from Herald Station with Alara alone in the back, cuffed to a bench, 2 guards watching her with expressions somewhere between suspicion and confusion. Through the reinforced window, she saw the city passing by, the capital she'd hidden in for 8 years, now fully aware of her existence. Her tablet was gone. Her weapon was gone. She had nothing but the clothes on her back and the knowledge that somewhere out there, 73 different organizations were reading through evidence that would destroy Renfeld and Thorne, if they believed it, if they acted on it, if they didn't get pressured into burying it. Too many ifs. The vehicle turned down a street that wasn't on the route to central detention. Alara's stomach dropped. "This isn't the right way," she said. The guards didn't respond. "I said this isn't the right way." Central detention is north. We're heading west. One guard finally looked at her. Change of plans. What change? I have a right to know where you're taking me. You have the right to shut up. The vehicle turned again. They were in the industrial district now, the same area where Thorne had met Renfeld's people. Alara felt ice crystallize in her veins. You're not police, she said quietly. You're Renfeld's people. The guard smiled. It wasn't pleasant. Smart girl. Shame you couldn't stay invisible. Alara looked at the cuffs. Standard law enforcement issue. She'd studied them during Lydia's security training, learned the vulnerabilities. But she needed a pin or a thin piece of metal to exploit the mechanism. She had nothing. The vehicle pulled into an abandoned warehouse. Stopped. The rear doors opened. Rough hands dragged her out. She saw 3 more vehicles, a dozen armed personnel, and in the center of it all, Marcus Renfeld himself. He looked exactly like he had 8 years ago. Tall, thin, expensively dressed. The man who'd built the case that killed her father. The man who'd stolen his life's work and weaponized it. Miss Voss, he said pleasantly, I wish I could say it's a pleasure, but you've been extraordinarily inconvenient. Where's Calder? Duke Vance is being processed through official channels. He'll face trial, be convicted based on the evidence we've prepared, and spend the rest of his life in a military detention facility. Tragic fall from grace, but not unprecedented. The evidence we released, will be investigated and ultimately dismissed. I have 30 years of credibility. Vance has a history of political aggression. You're the daughter of a convicted traitor. Who do you think the sovereignty will believe? Renfeld stepped closer. The files you stole from my office were incomplete, missing context, easy to discredit as fabrications or misinterpretations. We have your signature on transfer orders. We have your financial records. You have documents that will be examined by committees I've worked with for decades. Committees chaired by people like Aldrich Thorne. Do you really think they'll side with a fugitive duke and a vengeful daughter over established institutional authority? Alara's mind raced. He was right. The evidence was strong, but institutions protected their own, especially when the alternative was admitting they'd executed an innocent man and enabled economic terrorism for 8 years. So what happens to me? She asked, keeping her voice level. That depends. The smart play is to make you disappear. Unfortunate accident during transport. It happens. Renfeld studied her. But you're Simon Voss's daughter. You have his mind, his talent. That's valuable. So I'm going to offer you a choice. I'm not working for you. Not for me. With me. Your father was brilliant, but he was limited by morality, by loyalty to a system that ultimately destroyed him. You don't have to make the same mistake. Renfeld's voice was almost gentle. I can give you resources, protection, freedom to work at the highest levels of algorithmic development. All I need is your expertise and your silence. You killed my father. I eliminated a threat to an operation that has generated more wealth and power than your father could have imagined. He would have exposed it. He had to be removed. Renfeld paused. But you're not him. You're smarter, more pragmatic. You survived 8 years invisible. That takes intelligence and adaptability. Work with me, and you'll have everything you want. Refuse, and you'll die in this warehouse, just like he died on that gallows. Elora looked at him, at the man who'd destroyed her family, who'd turned her father's genius into a weapon, who'd built an empire on betrayal and murder. And she smiled. You're right, she said quietly. I'm not my father. I'm not limited by his morality. Renfeld's expression shifted, interest, calculation. But I'm also not stupid enough to trust you. You kill everyone who becomes inconvenient. I'd be useful for maybe 6 months before I knew too much and became a liability. Alara stepped closer, her cuffed hands not stopping her. So here's my counteroffer. You let me walk out of here. You face whatever justice the sovereignty decides on. And I don't use the secondary evidence package I uploaded to a dead man's switch that triggers if I don't check in every 12 hours. Renfeld's eyes narrowed. You're bluffing. Am I? I mapped your entire operation during our investigation. I know about the offshore accounts in the Terran Isles. I know about the shell companies in the free cities. I know about the military contracts you manipulated to create artificial scarcity. I uploaded it all to a distributed server with automatic release protocols. She held his gaze. You kill me, and every intelligence agency on the continent gets the keys to your empire. You didn't have time to build that kind of failsafe. I built it 3 weeks ago, when I first started investigating you, because I knew if I found proof, you'd try to kill me. Ilara let the smile sharpen. I told you, I survived 8 years by knowing every exit. Silence. Renfeld studied her, looking for the lie. Ilara kept her expression cold and certain, praying he couldn't see the terror underneath. Prove it, he said finally. Check your priority server, the one you think is isolated. I left you a message. Renfeld pulled out his phone, typed. His expression went very still. On his screen was a single line of code Ilara had planted during their infiltration. A signature only she could have created, sitting in the heart of his most secure system. 12 hours, she said. Miss one check-in, and everything goes public. Through channels you can't suppress or control. Renfeld lowered the phone. His expression was unreadable. You understand what this means. You'll spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder, waiting for me to find a way around your fail-safe. I've spent the last 8 years looking over my shoulder. I'm used to it. Ilara held out her cuffed wrists. But right now, you're going to let me go. Because that's the only move that doesn't end with your entire conspiracy exposed. And Vance? Goes to trial? Let your institutional protection work. Maybe he gets convicted. Maybe he doesn't. But he's not my concern right now. I am. Renfeld considered. The warehouse was silent except for the distant hum of the city. Then he gestured. One of his people moved forward, unlocked her cuffs. You're making a mistake, Renfeld said. This doesn't end. It just delays. Maybe, but I'm alive to see tomorrow. That's a win in my book. Ilara rubbed her wrists. And Renfeld, when this does end, and it will end, I'm going to make sure everyone knows what you did to my father. She turned and walked toward the warehouse exit. Every step felt like walking on ice that might crack. Every breath felt like it might be her last. But she made it to the door. Out into the night. Into an alley where she ran until her lungs burned and her legs gave out, and she collapsed against a wall in a part of the city she didn't recognize. She'd escaped. She had 12 hours to figure out how to actually build the failsafe she'd just bluffed into existence. And somewhere across the city, Calder Vance was heading into a legal battle that would determine whether their entire investigation meant anything at all. Ilara pulled out a backup phone she'd hidden in her jacket lining, paranoia that had just saved her life. Sent an encrypted message to Marcus. I'm alive. Renfeld let me go. Need extraction and secure location. And Marcus? We're going to need a lawyer. The best one we can find. She stared at the city lights and let herself shake. Let herself feel the terror she'd suppressed while facing down the man who'd killed her father. Then she stood up. Because in 12 hours she needed to make good on a bluff that was the only thing keeping her alive. And after that, she needed to save Calder Vance from a system designed to destroy people exactly like him. The game wasn't over. It was just entering its most dangerous phase. Marcus found her 3 hours later in a safe house that wasn't on any of Calder's official records. An apartment in the industrial quarter owned through enough shell companies that tracing it would take weeks. He brought a medical kit, hot coffee, and a laptop that wasn't connected to any network Renfeld could monitor. You look like hell, he said, setting everything on the table. Ilara was hunched over her backup phone, building the failsafe that would either keep her alive or prove she'd been bluffing. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely type. I feel worse. How's Calder? Arraigned on 12 counts of treason, economic sabotage, and conspiracy against the sovereignty. They're holding him in central detention pending trial. His legal team is good, but they're fighting uphill against fabricated evidence and a justice system that wants this buried fast. Marcus poured coffee into 2 cups. The evidence we released is getting traction, though. 3 oversight committees have opened preliminary investigations. 2 major news outlets are running stories questioning the official narrative. It's not enough yet, but it's movement. Not enough to free him. No, but enough to keep them from executing him quietly. Marcus sat across from her. What happened at the warehouse? Your message said Renfeld let you go, Laura told him. About the offer, about the bluff, about the 12-hour deadline that was now down to 9 hours and 14 minutes. When she finished, Marcus was silent for a long time. You understand what you just did, he said finally. You backed yourself into a corner. If you can't build that failsafe, I know. But I had to buy time, and this was the only currency I had. She took the coffee, wrapped her hands around it to stop the shaking. I need access to distributed server architecture. Something decentralized that can't be taken down by targeting a single node. And I need encryption that'll survive state-level cryptographic attacks for at least 72 hours after trigger. That's ambitious. That's survival. Alara set down the coffee and pulled the laptop closer. Can you get me what I need? Marcus made 3 calls. 20 minutes later, Alara had access to server architecture through a civilian blockchain network that operated outside government jurisdiction. It wasn't perfect, nothing was, but it was distributed enough that killing it would require simultaneously hitting nodes across 14 countries. She started building. The failsafe was elegant in its simplicity. If she didn't check in every 12 hours using a biometric authentication protocol, the system would automatically decrypt and distribute the secondary evidence package to 87 recipients. Intelligence agencies, foreign governments, media organizations that specialized in exposing corruption, WikiLeaks-style operations that would spread the information faster than Renfeld could suppress it. But the weak point was the biometric authentication. She needed something Renfeld couldn't fake if he killed her and tried to use her fingerprints or retinal scan, something that required her to be alive and conscious. She built a cognitive test, a randomized pattern recognition challenge that required her specific neural pathways to solve. It would take her maybe 30 seconds. It would take anyone else, even with her biometric data, hours or days. Long enough for the failsafe to trigger. 6 hours until the first check-in. She tested the system 17 times, breaking and rebuilding components until she was certain it would hold. Marcus watched her work with an expression somewhere between admiration and concern. You're building a dead man's switch based on pattern recognition puzzles. My father used to give me these when I was a kid, before he... She didn't finish, didn't need to. It's the one thing I can do that no one else can replicate, not even with torture or coercion or whatever Renfeld tries. What about Calder? Does he know about this? No, and he can't. If Renfeld suspects Calder has information about the failsafe, he becomes a target. This way, he's insulated. He goes to trial, fights the charges on the evidence we already released. Win or lose, he's separate from what I'm doing. He won't like being cut out, He's not in a position to have opinions about it. Alara's voice was harsher than she intended. She softened it. Look, I know this is messy, I know it's risky. But keeping Calder alive means keeping him separate from my insurance policy. If Renfeld thinks killing him gets him closer to me, Calder's dead. This way, there's no strategic value in it. Marcus nodded slowly. Okay, but we need to talk about the trial. Because the evidence we released is strong, but Renfeld and Thorne have had 8 years to build institutional protection. The committees investigating them are chaired by their allies. The media outlets covering this are owned by corporations with financial ties to their operation. We're fighting momentum. Then we change the battlefield. Alara pulled up a new screen. The tribunal is public, right? Open proceedings? Yeah. By law, yes. But they'll try to classify portions under state security protocols. Let them try, because I'm going to testify, in person, on the record, and I'm going to dismantle their case piece by piece until there's nothing left but truth. Marcus stared at her. You're talking about putting yourself in front of the same tribunal that executed your father, the same people who are trying to bury you in Calder. Yes, they'll destroy you on cross-examination. Your credibility is already damaged. Daughter of a traitor, accomplice to Calder's alleged crimes. Thorne will use that to tear apart everything you say. Only if I give him ammunition. Alara stood, pacing. I spent 8 years invisible. I know how to control information, how to present only what serves my purpose. And Marcus? I've been living with this evidence for weeks. I know it better than anyone alive, including the people who created it. I can defend it. I can prove it. But I need to be in that room. The prosecution will never call you as a witness. You're the accused's accomplice. Then I don't wait for them to call me. I invoke civilian testimony rights under the Public Accountability Act. Any citizen can testify in cases involving government officials if they can demonstrate direct knowledge of relevant facts. I demonstrate knowledge. I get my platform. Marcus pulled up the relevant statutes on his own device. Read through them. It's a long shot. The presiding judge could deny the petition. Or the presiding judge could be one of the oversight committee members who's already questioning the official narrative. Who is it? Justice Helena Vero. She's hard to read. Career judiciary. No obvious political alignment, but she approved the arrest warrants, so she's not automatically on our side. Then I need to give her a reason to let me testify, something that makes denying me look like suppression. Alara was already drafting the petition in her mind. Alara was already drafting what if I submit the petition along with a preliminary forensic analysis showing specific inconsistencies between the evidence presented against Calder and the actual financial data? Make it detailed enough that refusing to hear me suggests the prosecution is afraid of scrutiny. That could work, or it could backfire and make Vero more defensive. Everything we do could backfire, but doing nothing definitely fails. Alara met his eyes. I need to do this. For my father, for Calder, for everyone else Renfeld will destroy if we don't stop him. Marcus was quiet for a moment, then he nodded. I'll help you draft the petition, but Alara, if you go into that tribunal, you need to be ready for them to use every weapon they have. Your father's conviction, your disappearance, the fact that you broke into Renfeld's office and stole classified material. They'll make you look like a conspiracy theorist or worse. Let them try. Because I've got 8 years of rage and a photographic memory for code signatures. I'll bury them in technical details until the only choice is believing me or admitting they're too incompetent to understand their own systems. She submitted the petition 4 hours later, along with a 40-page forensic analysis that documented every discrepancy between the charges against Calder and the actual data trail. It was technical, thorough, and brutal in its precision. Marcus helped her format it for legal submission, then sent it through official channels to Justice Varo's office with copies to every oversight committee and media outlet that had shown interest in the case. Then they waited. Alara used the time to complete her first fail-safe check-in. The system worked flawlessly. She solved the cognitive pattern in 28 seconds. Biometric authentication confirmed. Timer reset for another 12 hours. She felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. She was alive. The bluff was real now. Renfeld couldn't touch her without triggering exposure. The response came 6 hours later. Justice Vero would hear Alara's petition in a preliminary session before the main tribunal proceedings. If Alara could demonstrate relevant knowledge and material testimony, she'd be permitted to testify. If not, the petition would be denied and she'd face immediate arrest for her role in the alleged conspiracy. It's a trap, Marcus said, reading the official notice. She's giving Renfeld's team a chance to discredit you before you ever reach the actual trial. Or she's giving me a chance to prove I'm worth listening to. Alara was already preparing. Either way, it's an opening. When's the session? Tomorrow, 10 in the morning. Public attendance allowed, but limited seating. Marcus looked at her. Are you ready for this? Alara thought about 16-year-old Alara, watching her father hang while the sovereignty's justice system applauded itself for protecting national security. About 8 years of hiding and survival and carrying the weight of knowing her father died for someone else's crime. About Calder, sitting in a cell right now because he'd believed her when no one else would. I've been ready since the day they killed my father, she said. I just didn't have the platform. Now you do. Don't waste it. The preliminary session was held in a smaller chamber within the Justice Complex, a room designed for procedural hearings rather than full trials, but still imposing with its dark wood paneling and the sovereignty's seal mounted above the judge's bench. Alara entered with Marcus at her side, wearing the only professional clothes she owned, a gray suit that was slightly too big and made her look younger than her 24 years. She'd tied her hair back, no jewelry, nothing that could be used to paint her as anything other than what she was, someone who'd survived in the shadows long enough to fight back. Justice Helena Vero was a woman in her early 60s with silver hair pulled into a severe bun and eyes that missed nothing. She sat behind the bench reviewing documents while the room filled. The prosecution team arrived. 3 lawyers in expensive suits, backed by Aldrich Thorne himself. He looked at Alara with an expression of paternal disappointment that made her want to spit. Renfeld wasn't there, too smart to show his face. But Alara knew he was watching. This session will come to order. Varro's voice cut through the room like a blade. We're here to evaluate Miss Alara Voss's petition to testify in the matter of the sovereignty versus Calder-Vance. Miss Voss, you claim to have material knowledge relevant to the charges. The burden is on you to demonstrate that knowledge rises to the level of warranted testimony. You'll have 30 minutes. Use them wisely. Alara stood. Her legs felt steady. Her mind was clear and cold. Thank you, Justice Varro. I'll be brief because the evidence speaks for itself. She pulled out her tablet, connected it to the chamber's display system. The screen lit up with data, financial transactions, code signatures, network maps. All of it sourced from the evidence they'd released, now organized into a narrative that was impossible to ignore. The charges against Duke Vance allege he orchestrated economic sabotage through manipulation of the sovereignty's banking algorithms. The prosecution presents financial records showing payments to shell companies allegedly used to fund these attacks. I'm here to demonstrate that these allegations are fabrications based on a fundamental misunderstanding or deliberate misrepresentation of how these systems actually function. She pulled up the first exhibit. This is the code signature the prosecution claims links Vance to the attacks. It's sophisticated, elegant, and completely inconsistent with anything Vance would have access to or knowledge of. Because this signature doesn't belong to Vance, it belongs to my father, Simon Voss. The room went silent. Thorne shifted in his seat. Simon Voss was executed 8 years ago for treason, Alara continued, her voice steady. The prosecution in that case claimed he sold encryption keys to foreign interests. But I've analyzed the evidence from both cases, and the pattern is unmistakable. The same code signature appears in both, which means either my father is committing economic crimes from beyond the grave, or someone stole his work and has been using it for the past 8 years. She pulled up a comparison analysis. Here's the evidence from my father's trial. Here's the evidence from Vance's charges. The algorithmic structure is identical. The implementation techniques match. Even the error handling protocols are the same. This isn't coincidence. This is systematic use of stolen intellectual property. Varro leaned forward. Miss Voss, are you suggesting the evidence against your father was also fabricated? I'm demonstrating that the code signature used to convict him doesn't match his actual work methodology. My father never used recursive layering in his encryption designs. He considered it inelegant and inefficient, but the evidence presented at his trial used recursive layering extensively. Someone created forgeries sophisticated enough to fool a tribunal, but not sophisticated enough to fool someone who actually understood his techniques. One of the prosecutors stood. Objection, Miss Voss is hardly an objective analyst. She has every incentive to discredit her father's conviction. I'm a data analyst with 8 years of professional experience, Alara shot back, and I've documented every claim I'm making with technical analysis that anyone with cryptographic expertise can verify. If the prosecution wants to challenge my findings, I invite them to submit the evidence to independent review. Varro raised a hand. The objection is noted. Miss Voss, continue. Alara pulled up financial data. The shell companies allegedly controlled by Vance show payment patterns that predate his investigation into the economic conspiracy. In fact, these companies were active during my father's trial. They were used then to create the appearance of foreign connections. They're being used now to frame Vance the same way. It's the same playbook. She let that hang for a moment, then played her strongest card. I've traced these shell companies to their actual point of origin. The incorporation documents, the financial routing, the communication protocols, all of them lead back to a single source. Corvus Strategic Consulting, headed by Marcus Renfeld. The same Marcus Renfeld who prosecuted my father. The same Marcus Renfeld who had access to all my father's work after his execution. The same Marcus Renfeld who's been operating an economic manipulation scheme for 8 years using that stolen work. The room erupted. Reporters in the gallery were typing frantically. Thorne was on his feet, objecting loudly. The prosecutors were conferring in urgent whispers. Varro's gavel came down like thunder. Order. I will have order in this chamber, sir. Alara didn't stop. I have documentation, financial records, transfer orders bearing Renfeld's signature, code analysis proving the connection between my father's work and the current attacks. And I have testimony from Duke Vance's investigation that corroborates everything I'm presenting. If this tribunal wants the truth, I can provide it, in detail, under oath, on the record. Varro studied her for a long moment. Miss Voss, you understand that if you testify and it's later proven you've perjured yourself, you'll face criminal charges. I understand. I'm willing to take that risk because I'm telling the truth. And you understand that by testifying, you're opening yourself to cross-examination that will be extensive and potentially hostile. I'm prepared for that. Varro looked at the prosecution team. Do you have questions for Miss Voss regarding her claimed expertise? The lead prosecutor stood, a man named Garrett Cole with a reputation for destroying witnesses. Miss Voss, you claim expertise in cryptographic analysis. What are your credentials? Ashamed. 8 years as a data analyst specializing in security systems. Multiple certifications in network architecture and encryption protocols. And I'm Simon Voss's daughter. I learned from the best before the sovereignty killed him. You have no formal advanced degrees, no peer-reviewed publications, no recognition from established academic institutions. I have practical experience analyzing real-world systems under real-world conditions. I don't need a credential from an institution that failed to question my father's conviction. Cole's expression hardened. Your father was convicted of treason by a military tribunal. Are you claiming that tribunal was wrong? Well, I'm claiming that tribunal was fed false evidence by someone who knew exactly how to manipulate the process. Someone like Marcus Renfeld. That's a serious accusation against a decorated military intelligence officer. It's a documented fact supported by evidence I'm prepared to present. That evidence you obtained by breaking into Corvus Strategic's offices. Evidence obtained illegally. Alara smiled. Evidence obtained during an authorized investigation led by Duke Vance under legitimate oversight protocols. The legality of the acquisition is a separate question from the validity of the content, and the content is devastating. Cole shifted tactics. You disappeared for 8 years after your father's execution. During that time, you lived under an assumed name, avoided all contact with authorities. That's the behavior of someone with something to hide. That's the behavior of someone who watched her father be executed for a crime he didn't commit and realized the system wasn't interested in justice. I hid because I was 16 and terrified and had no reason to trust the institutions that had just destroyed my family. And now you've aligned yourself with Calder Vance, a man accused of the same crimes as your father. That doesn't strike you as suspicious? What strikes me as suspicious is that the same people who prosecuted my father are using the same fabricated evidence to prosecute Vance. What strikes me as suspicious is that Aldrich Thorne, who sits in this chamber as if he has the moral authority to judge anyone, took a mysterious 5-day leave right before my father's trial. What strikes me as suspicious is that Marcus Renfeld built a private consulting empire immediately after prosecuting the one man whose work could have exposed what he was really doing. She was pushing hard now, anger bleeding through the professional veneer, but she couldn't help it. 8 years of suppressed rage were finding their voice. So yes, I aligned myself with Vance because he was the first person in 8 years who looked at the evidence and saw what I saw, that my father was innocent, that someone framed him, and that same someone has been destroying the sovereignty's economy ever since. If that makes me suspicious, fine, but it also makes me right. Cole started to respond, but Varro cut him off. I've heard enough. Miss Voss has demonstrated sufficient knowledge of the technical aspects of the case and sufficient grounds to justify testimony. Her petition is granted. She'll testify in the main tribunal proceedings starting tomorrow. Relief hit Alara so hard she nearly stumbled. Marcus caught her elbow, steadying her. Varro wasn't finished. However, Miss Voss should understand that the tribunal will scrutinize every claim she makes. If her testimony is found to be unreliable or deliberately false, The consequences will be severe. Court is adjourned. The gavel came down. Elara let Marcus guide her out of the chamber while reporters shouted questions and Thorne glared with undisguised hostility. They made it to a side exit before her legs finally gave out. Marcus caught her, lowered her to a bench. "You did it," he said quietly. "You're in." "I'm in," Elara repeated. Her hands were shaking again. "Now I just have to not screw it up." "You won't. You were brilliant in there." "No, I was angry in there. I need to be smarter tomorrow. More controlled. Anger is what made you credible. It's what made Vero believe you." Marcus sat beside her. "But you're right. Tomorrow's the real fight. The full tribunal, Calder's fate, your father's legacy, everything." "What?" Elara nodded. She pulled out her phone, checked the fail-safe timer. 8 hours until the next check-in. She was keeping herself alive 12 hours at a time while trying to save Calder and expose Renfeld. It was unsustainable. Eventually, something would break. But not today. Today, she'd won the right to fight. The main tribunal proceedings began the next morning in the Grand Chamber, a space designed to remind everyone that the sovereignty's justice was absolute and unavoidable. Calder was brought in wearing prison clothes that somehow still looked dignified on him. He saw Elara in the witness section, and something shifted in his expression. Relief, concern, pride. All of it gone in an instant, replaced by the political mask he wore like armor. Justice Varro presided over a 3-judge panel, flanked by 2 junior justices who would vote on verdict and sentencing. The prosecution presented their case first, a carefully constructed narrative painting Calder as a power-hungry duke who'd turned to economic terrorism when traditional political methods failed him. They presented the fabricated financial records, the shell company connections, communications logs that had been doctored just well enough to survive surface scrutiny. It was convincing. Elara could see the gallery responding to it, see the doubt creeping into faces that had been sympathetic. The prosecution was winning. Then it was the defense's turn. Calder's lead attorney, a fierce woman named Isla Wren, who'd built her career dismantling government overreach, stood and called her first witness. The defense calls Elara Voss. What but beshame? Elara stood, walked to the witness stand, placed her hand on the book and swore to tell the truth, looked out at the chamber and saw her father's ghost in every face, heard his voice telling her that truth was worth fighting for, even when the fight seemed hopeless. Isla began with simple questions, establishing Elara's background, her expertise, her relationship to the case, building credibility. Then she shifted. "Miss Voss, you've reviewed the evidence presented by the prosecution. Do you have an opinion on its authenticity?" "Yes. It's fabricated. Not all of it, but the key pieces tying Duke Vance to the economic attacks are false. The code signatures don't match his capabilities or his methods. They match my father's work, which was seized 8 years ago and has been weaponized by Marcus Renfeld ever since." The prosecution objected. Isla argued. Varro allowed the testimony to continue. For the next 3 hours, Elara dismantled the prosecution's case. She walked the tribunal through code analysis, financial forensics, network architecture. She showed how the same techniques used to frame her father were being used against Calder. She presented the transfer orders from Renfeld's office, the documentation of his access to Simon's work, the timeline that proved the conspiracy stretched back 8 years. The gallery was silent. Even the prosecutors had stopped interrupting. Elara could feel the momentum shifting. Then Garrett Cole stood for cross-examination, and Elara knew the real battle was starting. "Miss Voss, you paint quite a picture. A vast conspiracy spanning 8 years, orchestrated by decorated officials, all to frame 2 people. Don't you think that sounds a bit paranoid?" "I think it sounds like what the evidence shows. Evidence you obtained through illegal means. Evidence obtained during a legitimate investigation. An investigation you participated in as Duke Vance's accomplice. An investigation I participated in because I have expertise no one else possesses. My father's expertise." Cole smiled. "About your father. Simon Voss was convicted of selling state secrets. You've never accepted that conviction, have you? Because it was wrong. Or because accepting it would mean accepting that your father betrayed everything he claimed to believe in." Elara felt the trap closing. "My father didn't betray anything. He was murdered to cover up the theft of his work. Murdered? He was executed after a lawful trial. A trial based on fabricated evidence. Evidence presented by a military tribunal that included 9 officers with impeccable records. Are you claiming they were all corrupt? I'm claiming they were all deceived by someone who knew exactly how to manipulate the process. Marcus Renfeld. Yes, a man who served the sovereignty for 25 years, who prosecuted dozens of legitimate security threats, who has the respect of every major intelligence institution, and you expect this tribunal to believe he's secretly an economic terrorist. I expect this tribunal to look at the evidence instead of relying on institutional credibility that's being used as a shield. Cole pulled out a document. Let's talk about evidence. This is a psychiatric evaluation conducted after your father's arrest. It indicates he was experiencing significant stress, paranoia, erratic behavior in the months before his alleged crimes. Does that sound like the stable genius you're describing? Alara's stomach dropped. She'd never seen that evaluation. It wasn't in the public trial records. My father was under investigation. Of course, he was stressed. Or he was coming apart under the weight of his guilt. That evaluation is the first I've heard of it. When was it conducted? By whom? Under what circumstances? It's part of the classified trial record, sealed for security reasons. Convenient. You can make any claim you want if the supporting documents are classified. Varro intervened. Mr. Cole, if you're introducing new evidence, the defense is entitled to examine it. It's not new evidence, Your Honor. It's impeachment material questioning Miss Voss's credibility regarding her father's mental state. Isla Wren was on her feet. The prosecution can't introduce classified documents mid-trial without proper disclosure. This is ambush testimony. Possessing. The judges conferred. Varro ruled the document inadmissible without proper authentication and defense review. Cole withdrew it, but the damage was done. The implication hung in the air. What if Simon Voss really had been unstable? What if his daughter was just unable to accept the truth? Alara forced herself to breathe, to focus. Cole was trying to destabilize her, make her emotional, make her look like a grieving daughter in denial rather than a credible witness. She wouldn't give him that. Is there a question, Mr. Cole? Or are you just making speeches? My question, Miss Voss, is simple. Can you prove, not theorize, not speculate, but prove that Marcus Renfeld framed your father? I can prove he had access to my father's work. I can prove he signed transfer orders seizing that work. I can prove his company uses algorithms bearing my father's signature. I can prove the evidence against my father contains technical elements he never used. Put together, that's not speculation, that's documentation of a conspiracy. Or it's a daughter who spent 8 years building a narrative that exonerates her father and now sees a chance to make someone believe it. If that were true, I'd have gone public years ago. Instead, I stayed invisible until Duke Vance's investigation uncovered the same patterns I'd been tracking privately. 2 independent analyses reaching the same conclusion. That's corroboration. Cole shifted again. Let's talk about Duke Vance. You've been working closely with him for weeks, living in his estate, coordinating strategy. Some might say you've developed feelings that cloud your judgment. Alara stared at him. Are you seriously suggesting I'm lying to protect a man I've known for a few weeks? I'm suggesting you are invested in his innocence because it validates your own beliefs about your father. I'm invested in his innocence because the evidence shows he's innocent. My feelings are irrelevant. Are they? Because from where I'm sitting, you're a traumatized daughter who's found someone who believes her story. That's powerful. That could influence your analysis. My analysis is based on code structure and financial data. It doesn't care about my trauma or my feelings. It's mathematics. Either the signatures match or they don't. Either the timelines align or they don't. And they do. All of them. She leaned forward. You can attack my credibility all you want, Mr. Cole. You can question my motives and my objectivity and my emotional state. But you can't attack the data. Because the data is absolute. And it proves everything I've said. Cole tried a few more angles, but Alara held her ground. By the time Varro called a recess, the chamber felt different. The gallery was murmuring, Reporters were typing furiously, and even the junior justices were reviewing documents with new scrutiny. In the hallway, Marcus pulled her aside. "You were incredible. Half the room is ready to acquit Calder based on your testimony alone." "Half isn't enough. We need all of them." "Then you need to know 3 oversight committees just announced their opening formal investigations into Renfeld and Thorne based on your testimony. It's happening. The system is responding." Alara wanted to feel relief, but all she felt was exhaustion and the ticking countdown of her next fail-safe check-in in 4 hours. She was burning both ends of her life simultaneously, testifying in a public tribunal while maintaining a dead man's switch that was the only thing keeping Renfeld from killing her. Something had to give. The tribunal reconvened. Isla Wren called Marcus Hale to the stand, then Lydia Crane, building a picture of Calder's investigation, its legitimacy, its findings. The prosecution countered with their own witnesses, financial analysts who testified that the evidence against Calder was consistent with money laundering, communications experts who claimed the intercepted messages showed coordination with external actors. It went back and forth for hours. As the day stretched toward evening, Vero called for closing arguments. Garrett Cole went first, painting Calder as a ruthless political operator who'd crossed the line into criminality. He dismissed Alara's testimony as the desperate theories of a traumatized daughter who'd found an enabler in Calder. He called for conviction on all counts. Then Isla Wren stood. She didn't argue innocence through absence of evidence. She argued it through presence of a greater crime. This case isn't about Calder Vance's guilt or innocence. It's about whether the sovereignty's justice system will allow itself to be used as a weapon by those it's meant to hold accountable. The evidence presented by Miss Voss and supported by Duke Vance's investigation shows a conspiracy that spans 8 years, that has destroyed lives and destabilized our economy, that has operated with impunity because the people responsible had the institutional credibility to avoid scrutiny. If this tribunal convicts Duke Vance, it validates that conspiracy. It tells every corrupt official in the sovereignty that as long as you frame someone else, you'll never face justice. I'm asking this panel to be better than that, to look at the evidence, really look at it, and recognize that the person on trial isn't the criminal. He's the one who tried to stop them. The chamber went silent. Vero conferred with the other justices, then addressed the room. "This tribunal will recess until tomorrow morning. We'll render our verdict at that time." Court adjourned. As the room emptied, Calder caught Alara's eye across the chamber. He nodded once, acknowledgement maybe, or gratitude. Then the guards led him away, and Alara was left standing in a room that held her father's ghost and her own uncertain future. Marcus walked her to the safe house. What happens now? Now we wait and hope Vero chooses truth over politics. And if she doesn't? Alara thought about the failsafe. About the evidence that would flood the world if she stopped checking in. About the choice she'd made to survive 12 hours at a time. "Then I trigger the failsafe and we burn it all down," she said quietly. "One way or another, the truth comes out." She made her check-in that night, solved the cognitive pattern in 26 seconds, reset the clock. Then she sat in the dark and waited for morning, for verdict, for justice, or its absence. At dawn, her phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. "Your testimony moved people. 3 committees, 5 media investigations, momentum building. But be careful. Wounded predators are the most dangerous. V." Alara stared at the message. V? Vero? Before she could process it, Marcus burst through the door. "Turn on the news, now!" Alara grabbed the remote. Every major outlet was running the same story. Marcus Renfeld resigns from Corvus Strategic amid corruption allegations. Aldrich Thorne steps down from Oversight Committee pending investigation. They were collapsing. The testimony, the evidence, the public pressure, it was working. "It's not over," Marcus warned. "Resignation isn't conviction. They could regroup, fight back." Let them try." Alara's voice was steel. "We're not stopping until they're in cells next to each other." The verdict came down at 10 in the morning. Justice Vero read it herself, her voice carrying through the chamber with absolute authority. In the matter of the sovereignty versus Calder Vance, this tribunal finds the defendant not guilty on all counts. Furthermore, We're recommending immediate investigation into the allegations raised by Miss Voss and corroborated by the defense's evidence. The charges against Duke Vance appear to have been part of a broader conspiracy to obstruct justice and conceal criminal activity. Duke Vance is hereby released from custody with full exoneration. The chamber erupted. Alara felt tears she didn't know she had streaming down her face. Calder stood, shackles removed, looking at Varro with an expression of profound relief. Then he looked at Alara and smiled, genuine, unguarded, human. She'd done it. They'd done it. The fight wasn't over. Renfeld and Thorne would face trial, and that would be its own battle. But this moment, was victory. Small, incomplete, but real. But real didn't mean safe. Calder was released from custody within the hour, processed through a system that had condemned him 48 hours earlier, and now had to pretend the mistake had never happened. Alara waited outside central detention with Marcus, watching the media circus gather like vultures sensing blood. 3 oversight committees had announced formal investigations into Renfeld and Thorne. 2 cabinet ministers had resigned, citing health concerns that everyone knew meant they were running before the scandal consumed them. The sovereignty's political infrastructure was fracturing in real time. When Calder finally emerged, he looked like hell, exhausted, bruised from whatever had happened in holding that he'd never talk about, but alive, free. He scanned the crowd, found Alara, and something in his expression shifted. Relief so profound it was almost painful to witness. He made his way through the reporters shouting questions, ignored all of them, stopped in front of Alara. "You testified," he said quietly. "I told the truth." That's not the same thing. You put yourself in front of the tribunal that killed your father. That took... He stopped, started again. "Thank you." Alara shook her head. "You believed me when no one else would. This was the least I could do." "It was everything." Calder looked at Marcus. "Status?" "Renfeld's in hiding. Thorne's lawyered up and claiming immunity based on his legislative position. The Justice Ministry is scrambling to contain the damage, and we've got about 6 hours before they start trying to control the narrative." "Then we don't give them 6 hours." Calder's voice hardened back into the political weapon Alara recognized. "We hold a press conference. Now. Release everything we have. Make it impossible for them to spin this as anything other than what it is. Calder, you just got out of detention. Maybe rest before, rest later. Right now we finish this." He looked at Alara. "You willing to stand next to me in front of cameras and repeat everything you said in that tribunal?" Alara thought about the failsafe ticking down, 7 hours until the next check-in. Thought about Renfeld, wherever he was, watching this unfold and calculating his next move. Thought about her father, who'd never gotten the chance to defend himself publicly. "Yes," she said. "Let's finish it." They held the conference on the steps of the Justice Complex, a deliberate choice that forced the media to film them with the sovereignty's symbols of justice as backdrop. Calder spoke first, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd spent 15 years dominating rooms just like this. "For weeks, I've been investigating an economic conspiracy that has destabilized our nation's infrastructure and enriched those responsible at the expense of millions of citizens. That investigation led to evidence of systemic corruption reaching the highest levels of our government. When I tried to expose this conspiracy, I was arrested, charged with treason, and nearly convicted based on fabricated evidence. I'm standing here today because one person had the courage to testify to the truth, even when doing so put her life at risk." "Miss Voss?" Alara stepped forward. The cameras felt like weapons pointed at her face. She'd spent 8 years invisible. Now she was the most visible person in the capital. "My father, Simon Voss, was executed 8 years ago for crimes he didn't commit. The evidence used to convict him was forged by the same people who tried to frame Duke Vance, Marcus Renfeld, and his network of corrupt officials. They killed my father to steal his work, then weaponized that work to manipulate our economy while maintaining political protection through people like Aldrich Thorne. I've spent 8 years living with the knowledge that my father died innocent, and I've spent the last month proving it. The evidence is public now. The truth is undeniable. And I'm asking the sovereignty to do what it failed to do 8 years ago, hold the real criminals accountable." The questions came like gunfire. Alara answered the ones she could, deflected the ones designed to trap her. Calder handled the political implications, the calls for systemic reform, the demands for accountability. They worked together smoothly, each covering the other's gaps, building a narrative that was airtight and devastating. 40 minutes later, when they finally escaped the scrum, Marcus pulled them into a secure vehicle. That went viral in real time. Every major outlet is running it. The oversight committees are accelerating their investigations. The Justice Ministry just announced they're appointing a special prosecutor to handle Renfeld's case. "Who's the prosecutor?" Calder asked. "Helena Varro." Alara looked up sharply. "The judge from my tribunal? She resigned from the bench this morning. Took the special prosecutor position specifically to handle this case. Apparently, your testimony convinced her the system needed someone who couldn't be pressured." Calder smiled grimly. "Then Renfeld's in trouble. Varro doesn't lose cases." They drove to the estate, or what was left of it. The attack had done structural damage that would take months to repair. But Lydia had the security grid rebuilt and operational, and the study where they'd started this investigation was functional enough for what came next. Alara pulled up her tablet, checking timelines and cross-referencing evidence with the Oversight Committee's public statements. Thorne's claiming legislative immunity. Says he can't be prosecuted for actions taken in his official capacity. That only works if his actions were official, Calder said. Meeting with Renfeld in abandoned warehouses isn't official business. We need proof of those meetings, timestamps, locations, something that breaks his immunity claim. Marcus pulled up security footage from their surveillance operation. We have some of it, not all, but enough to establish a pattern of coordination. Mamu Shipunki. Then we send it to Varro. Let her build the case. Alara was already compiling files. What about Renfeld? Any leads on his location? He's got resources. Safe houses, offshore accounts, connections in countries with no extradition treaties. Finding him could take weeks. We don't have weeks. Alara checked her fail-safe timer. 5 hours. If Renfeld stays free, he's a threat. To me, to Calder, to everyone who testified. He'll rebuild, regroup, come back harder. So what do you suggest? Alara thought about the bluff she'd built into the failsafe, about the leverage it gave her, about the fact that Renfeld believed it completely. I suggest we make him come to us. Calder looked at her. Explain. Renfeld thinks I have a dead man switch that triggers if I don't check in every 12 hours. That switch is the only reason he let me go. But it's also a leash. He can't move against me directly without triggering it, which means he's stuck. Can't kill me, can't silence me, can't stop the investigations without making things worse. So he's contained, until he figures out a way around the switch, which he will eventually. He's smart enough. Alara pulled up a new interface. But what if we change the equation? What if we offer him a way out that seems safer than running? Marcus frowned. You want to negotiate with him? I want to trap him. We send a message through back channels, unofficial, untraceable. Offer a deal. I turn over the failsafe codes. He surrenders to Varro's investigation in exchange for leniency. We make it look like I'm scared, like I'm trying to end this before the failsafe forces me to keep running. He'll never believe that. He will if we make it look desperate enough. What if the message comes from someone he trusts? Someone who'd sell me out for the right price? Calder's expression went cold. You want to use one of his people as bait. I want to use his paranoia. He's surrounded by people who work for money, not loyalty. If one of them approaches him with an offer that seems too good to be true, he'll investigate. And when he does, we're waiting. Calder nodded slowly. It's risky. If he sees through it, then we're no worse off than we are now. But if it works, we get Renfeld in custody before he has time to build a counter-strategy. Alara looked between them. I need you both to trust me on this. Can you do that? Marcus and Calder exchanged a look. Some silent communication Alara couldn't read. Then Calder turned back to her. We trust you. Build the trap. Baut. It took 2 days to set up. Alara worked with Lydia to identify one of Renfeld's financial operatives, a man named Kellen Drew, who'd been flagged in their investigation but hadn't been arrested yet. Drew was smart, greedy, and importantly terrified of what was coming. When Lydia's people approached him with an offer, immunity in exchange for cooperation, he folded within an hour. Drew reached out to Renfeld through encrypted channels, claiming he had access to Alara and could deliver the failsafe codes for the right price. The message was perfect, desperate enough to seem real, greedy enough to fit Drew's profile, urgent enough to pressure Renfeld into acting fast. They waited. Alara made her check-ins like clockwork while monitoring every communication channel they had access to. Calder coordinated with Vero's team, positioning resources for rapid response. Marcus ran surveillance on every location Renfeld might use for a meeting. 3 days after the message went out, Drew got a response. Meet tomorrow. Midnight. The old industrial port. Come alone. Bring proof of access. Alara read the message and felt ice crystallize in her stomach. That's where they'd take someone to disappear them. He's not planning to negotiate. He's planning to kill Drew and take the codes. Which means we need overwhelming force, Lydia said. Tactical teams, aerial support, every advantage we can get. No. Calder was studying the location on a map. If Renfeld sees that kind of response, he'll vanish. We need minimal presence. Make him feel safe enough to show himself. That's insane. You're talking about walking into an ambush. I'm talking about giving him exactly what he expects, and then flipping it. Calder looked at Alara. You and I go in place of Drew. We bring the codes, or what he thinks are the codes. We get close enough for positive ID, then Vero's team moves in. Absolutely not, Marcus said. You're both too high profile. If Renfeld sees you, he'll either run or try to kill us. Either way, he exposes himself. And Vero's people are close enough to respond. Calder's voice was flat. This ends tomorrow night. One way or another. Alara should have argued, should have pushed for a safer plan. But she was tired of being afraid, tired of 12-hour countdowns and bluffs that could collapse at any moment. If Renfeld wanted her, he could come face to face and deal with the consequences. I'm in, she said. The port was a graveyard of rusted shipping containers and abandoned equipment, lit only by scattered security lights that created more shadows than visibility. Alara and Calder arrived at 2345, wearing concealed vests that probably wouldn't stop military-grade rounds, but made them feel slightly less suicidal. Vero's tactical teams were positioned a quarter-mile out, waiting for the signal. They moved through the container maze toward the coordinates Renfeld had specified. Every sound felt amplified. Every shadow could be a shooter. Alara's heart was trying to punch through her ribs, but her hands were steady. She'd loaded the failsafe codes onto a data chip, actually a virus that would brick any system it touched, but Renfeld wouldn't know that until too late. There, Calder murmured. Ahead, a figure stood in an open space between containers. Tall, thin, familiar silhouette. Marcus Renfeld. He wasn't alone. 4 armed personnel flanked him, weapons ready. Professional, disciplined. That's more than he needs for a simple exchange, Alara whispered. He's not here for an exchange. He's here to finish this. Calder checked his concealed weapon. Ready? No, let's go anyway, Bob. They stepped into the open. Renfeld saw them and went very still. Then he smiled, cold and humorless. Miss Voss? Duke Vance. I was expecting my associate. He sold you out, Alara said, keeping her voice level, but you knew that was possible. You know everyone in your organization works for money, not loyalty. Marshati Batepartiets. True, which is why I'm surprised to see you here. Unless you're stupider than I thought. Or I'm tired of running. Alara held up the data chip. You want the failsafe codes? Here they are. In exchange, you surrender to Special Prosecutor Vero. Face trial. Accept whatever the system decides. Renfeld laughed. A genuine sound of amusement. You think I'm going to negotiate with you? After everything you've cost me? The investigations, the resignations, the damage to my operation? I think you're smart enough to know that killing me triggers the failsafe and destroys whatever's left of your life. This way, you at least have a chance at leniency. Maybe a decade in minimum security instead of life in a military detention facility. Or, Renfeld gestured. His people raised their weapons. Or I kill you both, take the chip, and disappear to one of several countries that don't extradite to the sovereignty. I've been planning this contingency for years. Calder's voice was ice. You kill us, and you confirm everything we've said about you. You prove the conspiracy. You make yourself the most wanted man in the sovereignty. I'm already the most wanted man in the sovereignty. The only question is whether I'm caught or not. Renfeld stepped closer. I'll admit, Voss, you played this better than I expected. Your father would have been proud, but he was too moral to win, and apparently you are too. This ends with you dead and me gone. That was always the only realistic outcome. Elara felt Calder tense beside her, saw the calculation in his eyes. They were outgunned, outmaneuvered, about to die in a shipping yard because they'd overestimated their leverage. Then Renfeld's radio crackled, a voice, urgent and sharp. Sir, we've got incoming, multiple vehicles, tactical configuration. Renfeld's expression went flat. You brought backup. Well, I brought You didn't think I'd come here without insurance? Alara's voice was steadier than she felt. But here's the thing, Renfeld. I don't need the backup to win. I just need it to make sure you lose. She threw the data chip at his feet. That's not the failsafe codes. That's a virus that'll destroy any system it touches. The real failsafe is already triggered. I didn't check in 4 hours ago. Right now, every intelligence agency, every media outlet, every watchdog organization on the continent is receiving the full evidence package. Your offshore accounts, your shell companies, your contacts in foreign governments, everything. Renfeld stared at her. You're bluffing. Am I? Check your priority accounts. See if you can still access them. One of his people pulled out a phone, typed frantically. His expression went pale. Sir, the accounts are frozen. Multiple government seizures. It's all gone. No. Renfeld's composure cracked. You couldn't. The failsafe was supposed to. The failsafe was real. I just changed the timeline. Elara stepped forward. I let you think you had me contained. Let you think 12 hours was the cycle. But I built in a variable delay. Could trigger in 12 hours. Could trigger in 6. Could trigger if my biometrics registered extreme stress, like, say, facing down armed killers in a shipping yard. You never had control. You just thought you did. Lights flooded the area, tactical teams emerging from every direction. Vero's voice echoed through a loudspeaker. Marcus Renfeld, you're under arrest. Drop your weapons and surrender immediately. Renfeld's people hesitated, looked to him for orders. But Renfeld was staring at Elara with an expression somewhere between rage and grudging respect. You played me, he said quietly. The scared daughter, the desperate bluff, all of it. I learned from the best. You taught me that survival means controlling information and making your enemies believe what you want them to believe. Elara's voice was cold. My father never had that skill, but I do. And I used it to finish what you started 8 years ago. Renfeld's shoulders sagged. The fight went out of him in real time. Drop the weapons, he told his people. It's over. The tactical teams moved in, secured Renfeld and his personnel. Vero herself approached, flanked by federal marshals. Impressive work, Miss Voss, she said, though I have questions about the legality of your methods. I have answers. They're documented, and they'll hold up in any court. Elara was shaking now, adrenaline crash hitting hard. But right now, I need you to do one thing for me. What's that? I need you to officially exonerate my father, clear his name, remove the treason conviction from the record. He died innocent, and the sovereignty needs to acknowledge that. Vero studied her for a long moment, then nodded. I'll start the process tomorrow. You have my word. The arrest made international news. Marcus Renfeld charged with treason, conspiracy, economic terrorism, and murder. Aldrich Thorne charged as an accomplice. 3 cabinet ministers, 2 military officers, and 17 corporate executives arrested in coordinated raids across 4 provinces. The sovereignty's political infrastructure convulsed as the full scope of the conspiracy became clear. Elara testified again, this time in Renfeld's trial, which was held under maximum security with half the country watching. She walked the prosecution through 8 years of crimes, using her father's work as the foundation for proving every charge. Renfeld's defense tried to paint her as vengeful and unreliable. She buried them in technical evidence they couldn't refute. The verdict came down after 3 weeks. Guilty on all counts. Life imprisonment without possibility of parole. Thorne got 15 years. The cabinet ministers got varying sentences. The corporate executives lost everything: their companies, their assets, their freedom. And 6 weeks after the arrest, Justice Varro stood in the same chamber where Simon Voss had been condemned and read a formal exoneration. Simon Voss was convicted of crimes he did not commit, based on evidence that was fabricated by those who sought to steal his work and hide their own criminal activity. The sovereignty acknowledges this miscarriage of justice and extends its deepest apologies to his family. His conviction is hereby vacated, his record cleared, and his service to this nation recognized posthumously. Ilara stood in the gallery and let tears stream down her face. After 8 years, after invisibility and survival and fighting and nearly dying, her father's name was clear. The truth was official. Justice, late and imperfect, had finally arrived. Calder found her afterward in the corridor outside the chamber. He'd been instrumental in pushing for the exoneration, leveraging every political contact he had to make it happen. He looked at her now with an expression she couldn't quite read. "How do you feel?" he asked. Empty, relieved, angry it took this long. Ilara wiped her face. "Grateful you helped make it happen. I told you once that I should have tried to stop your father's execution, that I didn't have the leverage then." Calder's voice was quiet. "I can't give you back those 8 years, but I could at least help you get this. It's enough. It has to be." Well, they stood in silence for a moment. Then Calder said, "I've been offered the position of security minister, reforming the intelligence apparatus, preventing this kind of conspiracy from happening again. It's a mess. It'll take years, but it's important work. You should take it. You're good at important work. I want you on my team. Chief of Strategic Analysis. Full authority to build the kind of oversight systems that could have caught Renfeld before he killed anyone. You'd have resources, staff, actual institutional support." He paused. "You'd also have visibility, the opposite of the last 8 years." Ilara thought about it, about the apartment in the industrial quarter where she'd hidden, about the safe houses and backup plans and constant fear, about finally being able to walk in daylight without looking over her shoulder. "I'll consider it," she said. "But Calder, if I take this job, I'm not going to be your subordinate. I'm not going to be the brilliant analyst who does what she's told. If we work together, it's as equals. Partners. I wouldn't want it any other way." He extended his hand. "Partners." She shook it. His grip was firm, familiar now. "Partners." 3 months later, Ilara stood in her new office in the Security Ministry building, a space with windows that let in natural light and a door she could lock from the inside. Her team consisted of 12 analysts, 3 forensic specialists, and Marcus Hale, who'd accepted a position as her deputy after Calder convinced him it was the right move. The work was overwhelming, rebuilding intelligence oversight systems that had failed catastrophically, investigating residual corruption from Renfeld's network, training new analysts in the methodologies Ilara had developed. But it was also satisfying in a way she'd never experienced. She was using her father's legacy to build something that would prevent other families from suffering what hers had. On the wall of her office, she'd hung 2 things. First, a photograph of her father, not from the trial, but from before, when he'd been teaching her to code and talking about the importance of using knowledge to protect people rather than harm them. Second, the official exoneration document, framed and mounted where she could see it every day. Calder stopped by her office one evening when most of the staff had gone home. "I just got word. The final appeals in Renfeld's case were denied. It's over. He'll die in prison." Ilara nodded. She'd expected that outcome, but hearing it confirmed still felt significant. "Good. Is it? Good?" Calder leaned against the doorframe. "I keep thinking about what you said during your testimony, that the system failed your father. And yes, we've reformed it, but the fact that it took 8 years and nearly killed both of us to make that happen, I don't know if good covers it." "Maybe not, but it's better than it was. And that's something." Ilara stood, moved to the window overlooking the Capitol. "My father used to say that perfect justice was impossible, that the best we could do was keep trying to get closer to it. I think he'd be okay with what we've built here. Not perfect, but closer." Calder joined her at the window. "For what it's worth, working with you these past months has been I've never had a partner I trusted to challenge me the way you do, to push back when I'm wrong, to see things I miss. That was the deal. Equals. It is. But it's also... He stopped. Started again. I spent 15 years building power through fear and leverage and control. Then I met someone who refused to be controlled, and it threw my entire worldview into chaos. I'm still figuring out what that means. Alara looked at him, at the man who'd terrified the capital's political establishment and now stood in her office admitting uncertainty. It means you're growing, changing, becoming someone who doesn't need fear to be effective. Is that what you think? That's what I see. She turned back to the window. We changed each other, Calder. You gave me a platform to fight for my father. I gave you a reason to use power for something other than dominance. That's not chaos. That's evolution. Calder was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I like this version better. Of both of us. Me too, Betrayal. They stood together watching the city lights come on as evening deepened. Somewhere out there, the sovereignty was slowly rebuilding trust in institutions that had failed, slowly learning that accountability mattered more than reputation, slowly recognizing that truth, however difficult, was worth fighting for. It wasn't the ending Alara had imagined when she'd first agreed to work with Calder. It wasn't neat or complete or without scars, but it was real, and it was theirs. 6 months after the exoneration, Alara received a package with no return address. Inside was a leather-bound journal, her father's, apparently hidden by someone who'd known him and kept it safe all these years. A note accompanied it. He would have wanted you to have this. He was proud of you. He would be even prouder now. Anonymous. Alara opened the journal carefully. Inside were pages of her father's handwriting, notes on algorithms, thoughts on ethics, reflections on what it meant to use knowledge responsibly. And on the last page, dated 3 days before his arrest, a single sentence. If something happens to me, I trust Alara to finish what I started. She's stronger than she knows. Alara read it 3 times. Then she closed the journal, placed it on her desk next to the photograph, and got back to work. Because her father had been right. She was stronger than she'd known. Strong enough to survive 8 years invisible. Strong enough to fight a conspiracy that had destroyed lives and nations. Strong enough to stand beside someone powerful and demand equality rather than deference. Strong enough to build something better from the ashes of what had been destroyed. The sovereignty still had problems. Corruption still existed. Injustice still happened. But now there were people watching. People who'd learned that silence enabled evil, and that speaking up, however terrifying, could change everything. Alara Voss had spent 8 years invisible. Now she was the most visible voice for reform in the sovereignty. And she used that visibility every day to make sure no one else had to watch their parent die for someone else's crimes. It wasn't the future she'd planned, but it was the future she'd fought for. And standing in her office with her father's journal and Calder's partnership and a team of analysts who believed in the work, it was enough. More than enough. It was home.